Next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to the only show that you need to watch every single morning. It is, of course, Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6 and the day is upon us. It's Friday. We've reached the end of yet another tumultuous week in the world of Keir Starmer and his thieving, lying, disgraceful, useless government. And what would you know? We get all the way to the end of the week and there's yet more allegations around Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Hard to believe that nobody actually believes a word that she says. This all kicked off yesterday. Slightly after we finished our show, I actually ran into somebody who was a guest on Julie Hartley-Brewer's show on the Tube, and he said, what do you make of this Rachel Reeves story? And I said, to be honest, I've only just come across it. It turns out that we know, of course, that Rachel Reeves embellished her CV. We know that she pretended to be at the Bank of England for 10 years when in fact she was only there for less than 6. We know that she claims to be an economist but probably really isn't and isn't very good at it. We know that she doesn't really have a very good grasp of finances whatsoever. But it turns out that according to the newspapers this morning, she's now in an even bigger row, not only about her exaggerated CV, but about a bunch of expenses that she claimed while she was working at Halifax Bank of Scotland in a job which she uselessly and wrongly described as an economist job again, and it turned out she was actually just Rachel from complaints, and she was Rachel from the complaints department working in a Halifax branch up in Yorkshire, but she seemed to have a very good time while she was up there because she spent an awful lot of money on handbags, on perfume, on trips out, on taxis and all kinds of things, and she's now, according to the Daily Mail, under pressure to come clean on these expenses. Rachel Reeves, they say, was last night under pressure to come clean about her employment past amid claims that she was investigated for fiddling her expenses. Now, let's also put this into context. You know, this is a woman who tells us that she's got to tighten our belts, she's going to get Britain working again, she's going to get Britain spending again, she's going to get growth in the economy. She's also, if you might remember, a story that we told you some weeks ago, some months ago probably now, that she had her House of Commons credit card suspended because she ran up a bill of something like £4,000 and didn't pay it off. Now, call me old-fashioned, and there will be plenty of reasons why some people run into debt, and there'll be plenty of reasons why some people are not very good with figures, but really anyone who isn't very good at figures, and somebody who doesn't actually understand how a credit card works, and somebody who fiddles their expenses and lies on their CV, probably, in my view, call me old-fashioned, shouldn't be Chancellor of the Exchequer. I don't know what you think, but I'd very much like to hear it. 0344 499 1000. Benedict Spence is here. I'm sure he'll have a view on it. Very good morning to you, Benedict. We've got lots of other stuff. Trump, of course, and Putin. The talks continue. It looks as though Europe has taken a collective sort of hissy fit about the fact that Donald Trump has decided to end the war in Ukraine. What is it about the European leaders who want to keep the war in Ukraine going? Why do they want to do that? Why do they want us to continue to pour money down the drain to help Volodymyr Zelensky to stand still? What the hell is that all about? We've got another migrant story this morning. It's almost like migrant story of the day. They've got one in the Telegraph today. A Ghanaian tourist was granted the right to live in Britain under Brexit marriage rules, even though she did not attend her own wedding. Sorry, she didn't attend her own wedding. Doesn't that mean she didn't actually get married? I mean, sorry, if you're not at your own wedding, you didn't really get married, did you? Absolutely ridiculous. Well, we'll find out what that's all about. Also, we'll be talking about Hugh Edwards. He may not have given his money back to the BBC, but apparently he's been airbrushed out of Doctor Who, which is probably no bad thing. We're going to talk about Jamie Dimon, top banker, who's told his employees, don't worry about whether you want to work from home. Don't worry about asking whether you want to work from home. I don't want you to work from home, so either you come into work or basically you can disappear and not work for me anymore. 0344 499 1000. Lots of stories about the NHS this morning, including that £23 billion that the government gave to the NHS. Do you remember that? Wes Streeting, full of the joys of spring, said, oh, look, we're going to give them a load more money, £23 billion. Isn't that wonderful? Well, they've spent it all already. And they've only been in, what, 7 months? And where's it gone? Fixing patients, making sure the waiting lists come down? No, it's gone on pay rises for all the people that work in the NHS. Absolutely brilliant. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll talk as well about that attack in Munich. Yet another Afghan refugee, a 24-year-old, not content with being welcomed into the country that he did not have any right to be in. He decides to try and kill a few people while he's at it. Absolutely disgraceful. When are we going to learn that Western Europe is not the place for Afghans, it's not the place for Libyans, it's not the place for Iraqis, it's not the place for Syrians, it's not the place for people who are so violent and ghastly they want to kill us even though we're trying to look after them. I think it's time to just say that, and I make no apology. It's Happy Friday, it's Valentine's Day, by the way. We got gaffes, we got all manner of things to come for you. Plank of the week coming up later on as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. So, Friday, it is. Friday, Valentine's Day, February the 14th. Benedict Spence, very nice to see you. Thank you for joining me. It's so early in the morning. I guess we have to start with Rachel Reeves. Much as it pains me to do so, we have a few clips of Rachel Reeves. Yes. Let's start off with, shall we, with Beth Rigby grilling her on Sky News.
Does it hurt you to be described as...
In the manifesto, you criticised the Conservatives for taking the tax burden to a 70-year high. What is it now?
No, that's not a very good start. It's just the best we can do. Have you got another clip that we can actually play? How about Rachel Reeves saying that she's an economist?
Well, I'm an economist. I studied economics. I got a master's in economics from the London School of Economics, and I worked as an economist at the Bank of England.
That's one. Let's have Reeves on her CV.
Why did you say that you'd worked at the Bank of England for a decade when, in fact, it was... Well, it wasn't even 6 years, it was 5. I mean, that's exaggeration, isn't it?
Well, I worked at the Bank of England for 6 years, between 2000 and 2006. I was employed by the Bank of England, including I spent just over a year at the British Embassy working in the economics section there, supporting the government and the bank.
Why did you say it was a decade?
Well, I think you're taking... I think it's one interview. I worked at the Bank of England for 6 years. I worked for then at Halifax Bank of Scotland, I think, for 3 years after that. I became an MP when I was 31. But I think in the end, people want to judge me on the job that I'm doing today as Chancellor of the Exchequer. I'm qualified to do this job. But in the end, people are going to judge me. Am I growing the economy? Am I improving their living standards? And I'm determined to do just that.
Yeah, well, let's judge her on whether she's growing the economy. Is she growing the economy? Benedict Spence.
I suspect, in fact, that this is not the thing that she wants to be judged on, because, no, she's not growing the economy.
She's not growing the economy. Is she making people better off?
No, she's certainly not making me feel better off.
I think what people will also judge her on is why she's told a whole tissue of lies about where she came from. You know, I was talking to Mark Littlewood about this yesterday, who I met on the tube after he'd been on Julie Hartley-Brewer's show, and we were just saying, you know, why would you lie about it? Why, if you knew that you were going to be Chancellor of the Exchequer, or if you knew that you were going to become an MP and a fairly high-profile individual, why would you lie about what you'd done? You know, to be monstered by Richard Madeley is really something. When he asks her, what did you do? Why did you say you were there for 10 years when you were only there for 6? And it turns out now she was only there for 5.5 years, 1 year of which she spent at London School of Economics studying economics and becoming an economist. I don't understand the mentality. It seems to me that only a sociopath would actually lie about her background.
I think what I would say is that in Westminster circles, I think that there is a culture of exaggeration that is sort of seen as perfectly acceptable. You're just sort of bigging yourself up. You're just making yourself appear as confident and sort of bold as possible, and that's considered acceptable. Whereas, of course, in most walks of life, if anything, the average Brit is looking at their CV going, "Ooh, I ought to tone this down. I feel a little bit ashamed."
I had lunch yesterday with a friend of mine who happens to be my accountant, and I put it to him, and I said, look, if somebody came to you to work in your office who said that they had a degree in, I don't know, business or something like that, and that they'd studied for 5 years at the London School of Economics, and that they'd worked at the Bank of England for 10 years, and it turned out that some of that was not true. I said, would you get rid of them? And he went, yeah, absolutely. If we found out that somebody had faked their CV, if we found out that somebody had given us details that turned out not to be true, either you wouldn't employ them in the first place, or if you found out after you had employed them, you'd simply fire them.
Yeah, it's
in no other walk of life would you get away with this.
That's the real kind of that's the cultural disconnect, if you like, is that the average Brit would consider it. You know, this is all about fair play, doing the hard work, going into everything with everything on the table, and that's how most people get on in life. Whereas actually, it turns out in the sort of the upper echelons, it's nothing to do with that at all. It's actually how much can you take, how much can you get away with without actually having done the hard work.
But do you think that's just politics, though, rather than when you say the upper echelons? I think
that's what. Yeah, that's what I mean. And I think actually, to be honest, I think it's reflected in the performance of politicians generally. If you have people who go into this basically trying to obscure and trying to pull a fast one and feel good about it, and that's very kind of typical Westminster, thick of it kind of culture, why should you then be surprised if the country doesn't work? Because that's who you're being run by.
Forgive me for saying this, but I'm going to say it because I think it's an important word and we can use it. They're just bullshitters, aren't they? I mean, that's what they are.
They are.
They're kidding us that they know what they're talking about. They're kidding us that they know what they're doing. And the bottom line is the country is going down the gurgler because they actually aren't qualified to do the things that they say they can do.
I think that over the last couple of decades, trust in politicians has been eroded because they just can't hide this anymore. You know, once upon without any sort of sound snobbish or elitist about this, once upon a time you'd look at the typical cabinet, and there'd be X number of people who could do all sorts of things, had served in all sorts of different branches of society. This one could speak Latin, this one could recite all sorts. And they would be very educated. They wouldn't necessarily be the best person for that job, or very good, but there would be a sort of an integrity to the fact that they were the people who'd been put through the ringer. They had worked to get there. Now it really does seem to be. I mean, Rachel Reeves saying, I became an MP at 31. Who's got any business becoming an MP at 31? What have you achieved? Bridget Phillipson, again, no actual sort of professional background, has just worked for the Labour Party.
Or come through the council system or something like that.
Exactly. You know, the father was an MP.
Rachel Reeves unusually has actually had a job in the private sector, albeit not a very interesting job and not a particularly important job, but she has had a job in there. But the fact that I'm interested, as I say, in the kind of the process, the psychological process of somebody who just fibs about their background, because you and I, I'm sure, have all known people who do that, and generally speaking, they're people that you wouldn't wish to trust with anything.
No, but that's what politics does attract, and I think there has been a real... Frankly, there's been a failure of our democratic system. People like to talk about, how we have to defend democracy and X, Y, Z. Ours does not, in fact, attract the best people. It doesn't reward the best people. All it is that two major parties are a machine for people who want to be politicians. That's not a good start. Straight off that, you want to be a politician, that should set alarm bells ringing. And, you'd hope that an insurgent new party would take a slightly different approach, which is to say, clear house, don't look for people who actively try to seek to be be MPs. We should be going out and seeking the best, the brightest, people who don't necessarily think, oh, a life in public service is for me. Business owners, people who have been successful, who perhaps have retired maybe or thinking about it and think, maybe you'd like to give a little bit back for 5 or 6 years. Not, I want to start off at age 21 as, you know, a bag carrier for an MP, then I want to be a SPAD, then I want to be an MP. You know, but there are so many people in that kind of pipeline. They go to the right university, they just get the right position because they join the right university society.
Well, some of them might even have just been a National Union of Students and got on with each other like that.
Exactly.
But this is a BBC investigation, by the way, which is perhaps the most surprising thing. And the BBC, I will say, and I don't say it very often, have done a great job of actually looking into Rachel Reeves' time.
That's how you know you're in trouble.
I know. Working for this this job that she had in the Customer Relations Department of HBOS, and this was back in 2009. There were whistleblowers. There was a 6-page complaint about the number of expenses that she may or may not have got herself involved in. Inappropriate spending is said to have included lavish dinners, taxis, gifts, including for each other. She was part of this small team where they obviously went out for dinner, and everyone went, I'll tell you what, I'll sign this off if you sign yours off, and I'll buy you a gift, because they had some reward scheme working for this organisation, but they basically rewarded each other. Mrs. Reeves is said to have bought a £152 handbag on expenses as a Christmas gift for her boss in 2008, and the boss signed off on her expense claim. I mean, that sounds to me to be, on the very face of it, to be at least corrupt, possibly in terms of the inland revenue, even actually criminal. Other expense-funded purchases by Ms. Reeves are said to have included perfume, jewellery and wine. Treasury sources said the Chancellor was not aware of any investigation into her conduct at HBOS, and she left the bank on good terms when it was restructured after the financial crisis. She basically got fired, right? It was not just restructured, she was let go. Kerry Badenoch has urged her to come clean. I mean, the whole thing is riddled with sleaze, with a stench of corruption, and it's not that important on the face of it, but because of who she is and because of the job that she's got, you know, it's very important. And according to Guy Adams, he's written a big piece in the Mail today, when I put these claims to Reeves' office months ago, they were sharply refuted. Today, such denials must be taken with a pinch of salt. So this is a story that's not going away.
Yeah, and do you know what? We talked about this at the start of this Labour government, which was that there's been very little scrutiny from amongst a lot of the mainstream press placed on Labour, because it's just so much fun kicking the Tories. Justified and also very easy. But there just wasn't the scrutiny going into Labour. And then, of course, straight off the bat, the Lord Alley story. There was even, you know, tail end of the election.
As soon as they got in, there was the Lord Alley story,
Yeah, Angela Rayner's housing issues. All sorts of stuff just started coming out of the woodwork. The second a lot of journalists decided, OK, well, the Tories are gone. Who are these new people? Oh, I say, there's rather a lot here, isn't there? And it does just feel as if it's just been a constant sort of, as well as the economic
There's been no end to it.
As well as the political incompetence, there is also the personal stuff. And you just go, for heaven's sake, be one or the other. Be good at policy or bad at policy, be squeaky clean or be a little bit dodgy, but pick one. Don't be all of these things at once, my word.
I mean, she comes across in this whole story and this whole scenario as a bit of a shyster, basically. And she has done what everybody knows is the final sort of act of ignominy when you get, just before you get kicked out of office. She's made page 1 of the Daily Star, which I have here, and it's got the Chancellor's Pinocchio CV, right? And, I mean, once the Star have got round to you, you're really in trouble. From 1952 to 2022, I was the Queen of England, it says. In 1966, I scored a hat-trick to help England win the World Cup. In 1969, I was the first man to walk on the moon, and in 1989, I invented the World Wide Web. I mean, they're literally just laughing at her, as we are. In 2025, I'm learning my 4 times and 7 times tables. I mean, she is a laughing stock.
True.
She is a laughing stock of the country. Forget for a second the fact that there is zero growth. Yesterday we found out in the final quarter of last year there was 0.1%, which again is pretty much flatlining. There is no hope for the economy in this country. It's going to get worse before it gets better. April's coming, where more companies are going to have to retract because they're paying more in national insurance. You know, the woman is an absolute and utter unmitigated disaster.
Yeah. She'll survive. She'll get to do the next budget, I think. And then,
I think she doesn't last through the summer.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think she gets to the budget because Starmer needs somebody to blame when that goes wrong, and she is a busted flush anyway.
She is.
And then it really is just a question of who goes first. Her, or is it David Lammy says something really stupid at the UN or something like that? You know, which, to be fair, very likely to
happen. And literally any second. I'm going to try and replay that Beth Rigby clip that we didn't have earlier. Did we have that? Or do we not have it?
In the manifesto, you criticised the Conservatives for taking the tax burden to a 70-year high. What is it now at the end of this Parliament after your budget? What will it be?
I'm be really straight with people. The tax burden overall goes up, but
What's
we've
it go
made
up
decisions.
to, from where?
It's the highest burden of tax I recognise.
I mean, I'm going to be really straight with people. No, you're not. You've never been straight with anybody. You haven't been straight with the Prime Minister. You haven't been straight with anyone since you were born. You've fiddled your expenses. You've lied about your CV. You've pretended that you did jobs that you didn't do. How are you straight with the people?
Yeah, when you start a sentence by saying, I'm going to be straight with people, and people will go, well, that's a change. Thanks for that. I'm not going to believe it.
It's like whenever you're talking to anybody who goes, let me be really honest about this, and you just go, really? Really? Do you think so? Should we remind ourselves of Keir Starmer, who has been in the firing line this week? Yesterday we had some fun with imagining what Starmer grad would be like. This was Starmer's new kind of, idea for new towns to be built all over Britain. Migrant drop-in centres here, Lord Alley free gear clothing shops over there, lots of cycle lanes, lots of speed bumps, lots of ULEZ cameras and all that. But here he was getting very excited about the fact that Rachel Reeves is in fact a woman.
When Rachel Reeves stands up, she will be making history. And I can tell you, young women and girls across the country will be watching, they will look up, and they will notice.
And they'll go, as I said before, Jesus Christ, how did this woman get a job? She's completely useless, right?
I'm sorry, it's the worst advert for feminism.
It
honestly.
really is.
If you were going to go, this is the groundbreaking moment, and everybody sits there and go, well, we're never doing that again, then are we?
No, I said this yesterday. I mean, Caroline Leavitt, the new White House press secretary, now that's a woman that women and girls can look up to and go, oh my God, she's really good at what she does. Look at her commanding that room, absolutely batting people away who have been veteran journalists in the White House for years and years and years and years, and she seems to be supremely confident, incredibly good at her job. Rachel Reeves is the exact opposite of that.
I don't know what it is. Might just be because it's sort of the centre of global power, the global empire. But the United States does seem to just do politicians these days. Even Hillary Clinton was at least competent in her evil. Right. At the very least, you would look at her and, Kamala Harris was so unusual because she was completely incompetent. But that was just the Biden administration. Apart from that, actually, the US just seems to churn out much more impressive people, even the nutters, even the lunatics. Even the latest Kennedy. He's going to get stuff done. Whereas ours just sort of, well, nothing
He's an impressive figure, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Whereas ours just sort of declines very slowly.
They just appear on TV and they say nothing. Of course, they don't appear on this show because I think they're boycotting us without actually telling us. But, there we are. I can live with that.
Did you hear the Defence Secretary responding to the new US Defence Secretary when he was talking about Ukraine?
No.
He just sort of, his response was to just go, we hear you and we are committed to, this. And you're just thinking, you haven't got a clue. You haven't got a clue what to... unless an American tells you what to do.
Although John Healey's actually not a bad guy. I suspect he's been knackered by Keir Starmer, who's told him not to say anything.
But that's the point. He, and maybe Wes Streeting, up to a point you're going, they're not bad. But that's actually because the standard is just so low. And you do just feel very sorry for some of them.
Let's go back to the beginning of the week. That woman, Ashley, whatever her name is, Dalton, I think, who's been made the new health minister in the wake of Andrew Gwynn being fired, who wasn't particularly great either. Suddenly you've got a woman who's in the government responsible for what happens in hospitals, who thinks that we don't need gender-specific toilets, who thinks that you can identify as a llama, and who basically thinks that as a woman you can have a penis. That's where we are.
Honestly, the US is stripping out this stuff right now with this, this Doge thing. They're absolutely stripping out all the faulty wiring, all the rubbish, LGBTQ plus, everything can be a rainbow plastering. It's all going. And we're going to be sat here for 5 years watching it happen until something can be done about that.
I'm continuing to try and destabilise them to the point where they have to somehow just leave and walk away. We'll come back. We've got an exclusive clip. And I don't want to be too proud of this, but we should be very proud of it, of something that happened inside the cabinet this week. We're going to play it to you. Coming next, right here on Morning Glory.
good visual. But, you know, most farmers left that event feeling very despondent. You know, on the presentations that we were given at the event, we weren't really told where we were meant to be going from this. Very uninspired, to be quite honest. And, you know, we listened to 2.5 hours of people debating, a lot of very positive factual comments made by other MPs in our favour.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 27 minutes past 6. Steve says, this morning, Mike, I spotted some time ago on LinkedIn a profile of a guy who reported to me in the late 1980s. He claims to be the regional sales manager then, when it was actually me. Benedict Spence is right, there is no hiding place right now, and rightly so. Well, this is the thing. I mean, in this day and age, everybody knows that there is a thumbprint, a footprint. I mean, one of the things that happened, and the reason why this story has come out, Benedict, is that somebody who worked with Rachel Reeves at HBOS actually saw the claims that she was making and decided to tell a newspaper, actually, that that wasn't the job that she did. And secondly, you might want to look into some of the expenses scandals that happened at the time. And so, you know, it's even more ridiculous in this day and age of social media and of sort of, you know, digital footprints that you pretend to have done something that you haven't done.
I think if you want to enter public life, you want to be an MP, you should just come clean about these sorts of things. Right. And I think maybe there just needs to be, you know, if it's a small sort of thing, you know, a couple of speeding tickets, I don't know, DUI or something like that, there needs to be an understanding that
how about a conviction for fraud, like
that's the thing.
State for transport?
That's the thing. There needs to be an understanding that nobody is perfect, but at the same time, there needs to be an understanding that positions of power cannot attract people who are just fundamentally dishonest.
Yeah.
And I do think that, you know, maybe if we did have that sort of thing as when you're first elected, you know, we're allowed to sort of go through it, you know, all your records and go, OK, here it is, it's all on the table. Then it might not attract people like that in the first place.
I don't think anyone would care if she said, look, you know, there was an investigation into some of the money that I spent when I was up there. It wasn't actually concluded. It didn't seem to find any wrongdoing. This is the way it is. But the fact that the investigation went on is a problem because she's tried to conceal it.
Yeah.
And she's also changed her CV details on LinkedIn after she's been asked questions by journalists. But let's have a look at what I'm very, very proud to say is some particularly interesting footage that I've obtained from the Cabinet Office this very week. We've got our sources, we've got our spies all over the place. You can't escape from Morning Glory and the, of course, incredible production team here at Talk. Have a look at this. This is an eye and a peek into how it goes every single morning in the Cabinet Office.
Paint the whole world with a rainbow. That's very good. Come on, Bungle, put that comic away, because we're going to have a game of ball.
I don't want to play ball, thank you, Zippy. I'm quite happy as I am.
Yeah, but I've decided that we're going to play ball and we're all going to throw it to each other, and then what will... Zippy, I don't want to play ball either. I don't feel like it, because I am drawing. Yeah, but you must, George.
Just a minute, Zippy. Why must he?
Well, because I want to play. Look, I can't throw a ball to someone if there's no one to throw it to, now can I?
Then you'll just have to think of something else to do, won't you, Zippy? Yes, you will, Zippy, because I don't want to play ball, and George doesn't want to play ball either.
Oh.
I kid you not, I think that's what it looks exactly like, and that's what it sounds exactly like. but I don't want to do that, Prime Minister. Well, you must play ball because I've got the ball and I want you to play with it. No, I'm going to just lie on my CV. No, I'm just going to go and tell everyone that we should get reparations for the Caribbean. No, I'm just going to tell everybody that what we should do is be absolutely up against the orange tyrant. That's the Attorney General speaking, obviously. I'm going to do another podcast about how great it would be to give the Chagos Islands away to China. I mean, that to me is exactly how ridiculous this government is.
I mean, what was the extract from the book that was recently being serialised in the Times?
Yeah, get in.
Yeah, and talking about, I think it was Morgan McSweeney actually just saying, look, he's not in charge. This isn't at all.
My favourite part of that description of Starmer, which is brilliant, is that basically he thinks he's driving the train. He's actually the guy sitting in the front of the Docklands Light Railway, which is an automatic train, doesn't need a driver, and he just sits there pretending to be one.
It's basically...
I mean, that's him. That is his entire MO. Let's have a quick look at what he did yesterday, because he went off to introduce some other load of old cobbler's policy, but he got interrupted by some farmers who were protesting nearby.
It must be really incredible to be part of building, I mean, actually here, not just building houses, but building a community.
Just talk to us! Talk to us! Just talk to us!
Leaving the site, right, in a Range Rover, a chauffeur-driven Range Rover with his bodyguards, instead of just walking over to them and going, all right, guys, what do you want to talk about? You know, shall we just have a conversation? No. The first thing to jump in the car and get driven away.
This is something that I've only actually recently realised, is that all of these tractors are fitted with systems that allow them to play sort of late 90s club band hits.
Yeah.
And that they can chase
like the
people
Crazy
around.
Frog.
Yeah.
Who
I had
knew?
no idea that this was...
I mean, I must
you know what?
admit,
Maybe they do deserve to be taxed a little bit more. What are they spending their money on?
I mean, I live in the countryside at the weekends, and I see tractors, and I never hear them playing music.
No,
you know,
the symphony of the agricultural
Very
labourers.
bizarre. Anyway, listen, at 6:33, Benedict Spencer's here. We've got lots more to talk about, including, of course, what on earth is going on in the NHS. Private funds are needed to fix NHS hospitals, is what we're being told, and that's from one of the leaders of the NHS. Also, £23 billion that was given to them by Wes Streeting back in the summer has already been spent on pay rises, believe it or not. Coming up next, though, we're going to talk about something else. What's going on in America? Donald Trump, of course, is talking about doing deals with not just Russia, doing deals about the Ukraine war, but also he's triggering the prospect of global trade wars over tariffs. He's basically saying anybody who puts a tariff on anything is going to get an even worse tariff back. And he also says that VAT in this country is tantamount to a tariff, so he's going to start charging us money to send things over to him. So we'll find out what's going on with all that. This is Morning Glory. Back after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:36. Morning, Mike says, Doug from the Shooters Hill Anti-Woke Terminator Squad. That's a pretty good sign-off. He says, Mike, you know we don't need another 4 weeks of this dreadful lying government, let alone 4 years. Short of public insurrection, how do we get rid of them? The king steps in, or has he gone woke? Looking forward to the show. Yeah, well, he has gone a bit woke, but he's going over to see Donald Trump, apparently, to do a sort of a mercy mission to try and persuade him that Keir Starmer's not a complete plank. Also, this from Andy. What about in 2016, Rachel Reeves had her parliamentary credit card suspended because she owed more than £4,000 of unauthorised payments. Rachel Reeves was then Shadow Work and Pension Secretary. True. Another, it's like everything else, Benedict. One sort of unfortunate incident can be forgiven. For example, if she'd only invented the fact that she worked for the Bank of England for 10 years instead of 5.5, that would be fine. But she has had her parliamentary credit card suspended. She was the subject of an expenses scandal up at HBOS. She did say that she was an economist then, but she wasn't. There's this kind of litany of untruths, lies, deception, and just complete murkiness about her background.
It's the pattern of behaviour that I think gets to. But you know what? If she was a bit more creative with this misbehaviour, if she was actually sort of quite good at being able to massage the figures and change things to people's advantage, well, then maybe you might say Chancellor of the Exchequer's a good job, but she's not very good at it. I think she's not that creative.
Well, you look at Donald Trump, and people might not like much of what he says or does, particularly if they're against, him as a general principle. You can't pretend that he hasn't done a remarkable job in his first 3 weeks as president, which brings me to Kevin Tripp, news reporter at KABC Radio in Los Angeles, because, of course, he's been spending an awful lot of time, Donald Trump, in the last couple of days, talking about Russia, talking about making sure that there's peace in Ukraine. He's also been flailing around talking about tariffs, and he's particularly attacked the VAT, which is our kind of sales tax here. Kevin, very good morning to you. He's basically saying, VAT is like a tariff, so if it's 20% on all goods, which it is, and a lot of people here hate it, we're going to charge you 20% if you sell anything to us.
Yeah, that's his new salvo from his latest tariff threat that he issued a few hours ago, although it's a bit mysterious and murky as to what these tariffs might be or might not be. Basically, what the president said was, we're going to issue reciprocal tariffs, as they're called. In other words, if there is a country which the president believes charges more for U.S. exports to that country than the U.S. charges for similar imports into the U.S., he wants to try to level the playing field. And he's considering VAT taxes to be a tariff in this sense. However, these tariffs he's talking about are not going to be implemented until April at the earliest, if at all. This sounds like a negotiating tactic. Donald Trump trying to get other nations to give the U.S. more favorable tariff and trade policy. But he was very vague about these tariffs. You see him signing something there, but what he signed basically just says, so we're going to negotiate more. We're going to try to get better deals. There was no specificity as to what these tariffs might be. Of course, in the past, he has issued some tariffs. China now has tariffs against them that are even larger than they were before. But he also backed off on tariffs against Mexico and Canada, our largest trading partners. So it remains to be seen whether these tariffs will be carried out in a few weeks, and if so, how large they will actually be.
Yeah. And again, it's very indicative, really, of how things are going in the White House. I mean, he is moving at a very rapid pace and covering an awful lot of ground on all sorts of things. He was visited yesterday by the leader of India. Let's have a look at what happened in one press conference there.
People in India will naturally welcome your decision to extradite Thakur Rana to India back home. In that context, I would like to ask you a question about, in last few years, we have seen several groups in the US raising anti-India voice, calling about separation, terrorism activities in India. Do you think that should continue here in the US as well?
You're going to have to go louder.
Mr. President, people in India would be welcoming your decision to extradite Thakur Rana to...
I can't understand a word he's saying.
He can't understand a word he's saying. You know, I mean, that, again, is something you wouldn't normally see in any kind of diplomatic scenario. He's breaking all the rules here, isn't he?
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for somebody being honest when they literally cannot understand the question. I mean, that's what you should do.
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of style. Some presidents might have said, "I'm very sorry, sir. I actually can't understand your question.
Right.
Could somebody repeat it for me?"
Right.
Donald Trump's got a more brash style, and
Yeah.
I think that's what you're seeing on display there.
Absolutely right. I mean, big weekend coming up. I mean, notwithstanding whatever happens in the peace deal with Ukraine, but perhaps an even bigger deal coming up with what happens in Gaza if the hostages are not released by midday on Saturday. Donald Trump has already said, you know, all hell will break loose. I think the Israelis have said that basically the gates of hell will open on Saturday. What's the feeling there in the US?
It's interesting because that story, while it is certainly discussed, isn't as front and center as some other international stories like trade in like Gaza or like trade in Ukraine, for instance. But the Gaza deal appears to be moving forward a little bit more. And what I mean by that is there seems to be movement with Hamas and Israel agreeing to continue the release of hostages on Saturday. It's not a done deal yet, but over the last 12 hours or so, there certainly have been indications that it looks like the Israeli hostages will continue to be released on Saturday. But as we all know with these peace deals, anything could happen over the next 24 hours.
No, of course. Kevin, good to see you. Have a good weekend. Thanks very much indeed. Kevin Tripp, news reporter at KABC Radio in Los Angeles. It's been a weird week, Benedict, for all sorts of reasons, but I suppose front and centre, here in this country anyway, it's been all about immigration and these crazy, ridiculous, it seems to me anyway, immigration judges, people who sit on these upper-level tribunals, who have done, amongst other things, allowed somebody to stay in this country from Albania because his son doesn't like chicken nuggets that they make in Albania, so he has to stay here to eat them. The Pakistani paedophile who was told that he couldn't be sent back to Pakistan because he deserves the right to see his children, who would be unusually harmed if he didn't see them. The list goes on and on and on. This morning we've got a Ghanaian who's won the right to stay after staging a wedding that she didn't even attend, her own wedding.
I mean, men across the world will be delighted to know you don't have to attend your own wedding anymore. And
that will be a massive boost for them.
Yes, absolutely. Especially if it falls on FA Cup final day.
Yeah.
She's done us all a great service.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think she should be allowed to say. But as for the rest of them, it speaks, I think, to a culture in this country now that is just, it's prepared to bend over backwards to sort of accommodate people for the most tenuous things, because the sense is you can't be beastly, you can't be mean.
Right.
That's what it's about. And it doesn't seem to matter if it's a criminal that we're talking about. In the case of the paedophile...
Well, Stella Creasy was one of the highlights, wasn't she, when she actually said that we should treat everybody like we treated Paddington Bear.
Oh, honestly.
Unbelievably forgetting that Paddington Bear is actually a fictional character.
Stella Creasy... Honestly, Stella Creasy, if I could just go the rest of my life without ever having to hear Stella Creasy talk again, beyond the remit of, well, that's very funny, let's have a good laugh at her. There again, an example of, what is very much wrong with our politics. Does it attract the best people? No, it sort of attracts intellectually dishonest people. And in the case of Stella Creasy, often quite stupid things that she comes out with. Oh, Paddington Bear, who cares? We're not talking about Paddington Bear, we're talking about a paedophile.
But the most important thing is she looks really, really earnest when she says things about anything as well, And why are we sending these poor people back to the countries where they came from? Where, frankly, there's plenty of people living quite happily. And Pakistan is not a dangerous country to live in. If you happen to be somebody who's committed crime in this country and you get sent home, they're not going to lock you in irons or shoot you because you're a paedophile, are they?
Yeah, we have diplomatic relations with Pakistan. Right. People fly between Pakistan and Britain every day. We let lots of people
do business.
Yeah, it's about as safe a country in the region as you can expect. If it wasn't, we wouldn't have very close ties with it, which we do. So why is it that we're not allowed to send people back to it? And actually, if you sort of look at most of the countries around the world, OK, fine, I might not want to go and live there, but is it an actual hellhole?
Right.
No.
Right.
Are there flights running, regularly?
Yeah.
In almost all cases. So what is
if you've got an airport which is open to commercial flights from most parts of the world, I think you probably don't want to call it a hellhole.
No, frankly. And I think another thing is, frankly, do they have the capacity to shoot down your plane? Are they likely to do it if you try to drop off their own citizens?
Yeah.
In about 99% of cases, the answer is probably no, because it's also not a very good look for that country to refuse to take in its own citizens. Its own citizens might start thinking, hang on, what's going on here?
I mean, funnily enough, I read a story just yesterday yesterday, I think it was, that a lot of countries now are refusing to deport people back to Britain who are criminals who have been arrested in those countries because they fear that the prison system in this country is so dilapidated and ghastly that they think it would be inhumane to send them back to Britain. So, I mean, the shoe is now on the other foot.
But again, there's a real irony to that, and we can talk about the US as well, where the perception of the UK is that we're incredibly harsh on people who say things, but you can get stabbed for almost no reason in the street, which is half the truth, but it's not a complete fabrication that these things can happen. The politicians in this country, and a lot of the media class as well, are obsessed with our perception on the international stage.
Yes.
And that's why we can't be mean to people. But that is how people actually view us. A country that doesn't work. Why is that a positive
And also,
thing?
before that was the perception, and back in the sort of a long time ago when I first went to live in America, the perception of Britain was that it was very foggy, and it was very old, and everybody spoke very poshly, and everybody knew the works of Shakespeare intimately and could recite them on the street corner. You know, that's how ridiculous the worldview of anything is. It doesn't really matter what the worldview is of your country, and the most important thing really is that the people in your country actually believe in it and believe in the government.
That's the thing, isn't it? That there isn't really a commitment to the people of this country anymore. It's a commitment to some abstract idea about perception and also international law and human rights, which most countries don't really care about. You know, when you talk about, you can't do that because it'll violate his human rights, show me the country that actually goes, oh yes, we really must uphold the rights of these paedophiles, and we're not going to deport them, and we're not going to put them in prison. A lot of countries do dreadful things to people which actually do not cause us to go, well, we're never going to talk to them again. Actually, the world keeps on turning. And when you're talking about people who have committed appalling crimes in this country and have no right to live here, I think actually our approach, which is we're going to put you in prison, and our prisons are not awful, and we are going to deport you. Grand scheme of history, that's pretty lenient.
Well, one of the things that I find particularly amusing and rather irritating is that Rwanda, which is advertised on the shirts of Arsenal football players every single week, visit Rwanda. It's a great place to go as a tourist destination. They have a hotel there, and I'm sure they have many hotels, but they have one particular hotel, which is from the One and Only brand, and that's what it's called, the One and Only, which is a luxury hotel, which costs upwards of something like £3,000 a night to stay in. People go there in Dubai. People go there in, I think, Singapore. There's one. People go there in now Rwanda. If it was that dangerous, I don't think people who are very wealthy would be going there, would they? The
irony is that Rwanda, having had a very turbulent past, is probably one of the best-run countries now in sub-Saharan Africa. And a lot of people like to talk about how Paul Kagame is a dreadful dictator, X, Y, Z. Actually, just take a look at the standard of living in Africa. Take a look at the standard of most things working. Rwanda is right at the top. And yes, he may be a strong man, but bearing in mind he's used that in order to bring together a warring, disparate tribal nation and stop that ethnic sort of violence.
Stop them killing each other.
Frankly, you know, you've got to say, as African countries go, this is pretty good. That's how those societies are based. And this is a man who's managed to not only stop that, but as you say, bring a lot of commercial investment, bring a lot of tourism, bring all sorts of prosperity and opportunity to that country. It is not a dangerous country in the same way that Afghanistan is. And it's simply dishonest for people to say, well, you can't possibly
There are parts of south-east London that are more dangerous, I have to say. I remember also, we did a story when I was running the Scottish Daily Mirror up in Scotland, that there were parts of Glasgow that UPS would not deliver to, but they would deliver to all postcodes in Baghdad. You know, and that is what tells you everything you need to know. Coming up, we've got much more to do. We're going to talk about the NHS. We're going to talk about, of course, the child killer who's bizarrely the top dog in prison, running a cocaine and marijuana racket. But let's get some voice notes in under our belt. Richard is here, imitating Keir Starmer.
Morning, Mike. Rich from South Derbyshire here. Don't you seem to think that PMQ sounds more and more like an episode of Rainbow every single day?
Oh, well, people talking like this are just far right and they need to face the consequences.
Oh, no, kid, no. They're only putting things on Facebook.
Well, no, far right. I'm busy fixing the foundations. There's a 14-year, 22 billion black hole. Yes, I've got to sort all of that out.
Okay, so stop it. You're just such an idiot. You're so incompetent as a Prime Minister and nobody bloody likes you.
Well, that's just a very far-right way to think, isn't it? I think I'm going to put you in jail.
I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but it's not wrong, is it? It absolutely isn't. Let's have another one from Sam on Rachel Reeves.
Morning, Mike. Great show. Rachel Thieves, Keir Starmer. You know, I saw a post a fair while ago. It's a picture of Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. on someone's doorstep, and it said, "Warning, if you see these two scam artists, do not believe a word they say. They'll make all these promises and they won't deliver, and they'll take your money."
I mean, it's unfortunately true. This from Daniel. It says this: "Morning, Mike. Poor old Rach. Looks like it's back to the tea and coffee trolley for her. Even worse, though, is that she's really a bloke. Wait until that comes out." I'm not sure I can stand by that, but, you know, it's a free country. You can say what you like. Excellent show, Mr. Reeves, he says. Thank you very much indeed. 6:51, Benedict Spencer's here. Coming back, we'll talk about the NHS. We'll talk about King Charles, who's off to see Donald Trump. And we'll find out why one of the top bankers in the world says, "Don't even talk to me about working from home." This is Talk.
The fact of the matter is that FIFA have sold out everything, their integrity, the whole lot, and I think booze is just a part of it.
And it is part of the culture. I mean, I still hate the fact if I go to Wembley, if I go to a concert, I can have a drink in my seat, but if I go to watch a football match, I can't. I mean, it's just like, oh, for goodness sake. Although I think they're trialling it with women's football because, you know, a bit more sedate in terms of the crowds. But it is a part of the football tournament feel, isn't it? People drinking.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. It is Friday, so we've got some gaffes as well. Can we have a gaff before we get to the 9 o'clock news? Well, not the 9 o'clock news, even the 7 o'clock news, I should say. Benedict Spencer's here. Let's talk about the NHS, because on the front page of the Times this morning, the NHS chief, Amanda Pritchard, chief executive of NHS England, has said something that up until now would have been absolutely unheard of. She's called for the private sector to lend it money to fix crumbling hospitals. Now, hang on a minute. I mean, I believe when the Tories were in, the Labour Party were consistently telling them, don't let the private sector come into power. You know, Donald Trump's going to buy it. You know, Keir Starmer used to say that that Rishi Sunak was going to sell off the NHS to private concerns. Suddenly the shoe's on the other foot, and they're quite happy to encourage it.
I was going to say, if you're in the private sector being asked, can you lend us money, your answer will be no, I'll never see that money again.
I mean,
That sounds
really,
like a dreadful investment.
well, the other story we've got today is that the $23 billion that West Streeting allocated to the NHS back in the summer of last year has already been eaten up by pay rises to the people who work there.
Honestly, I mean, the Ministry of Health just stands there with your money, and it just goes, look at these fun coupons. We're just going to throw them out of the window. That's what we do with it. And because it doesn't actually improve the surface, it barely keeps it afloat. And as you say, it goes on pay rises for people who, honestly, there needs to be a real audit, actually, of the functioning of a lot of what goes on in the NHS.
To God, yeah. I mean, monthly statistics published yesterday showed a dire state of affairs in which, in A&E, a record 61,500 patients waited at least 12 hours for a bed.
It's
12 hours in A&E.
The stories about elderly people who had very serious issues being asked to, well, not even asked, just left in corridors, on chairs, on the floor. That's, again, we were talking earlier about, you know, countries that are good, countries that are bad, countries that are dangerous. That's the sort of thing you expect in a country that doesn't have a functioning healthcare system. You know, you find somebody who's been in a corridor for 24 hours and not been seen. That's the state that we're at.
It turns out they've been dead for 3 hours.
Yes.
I mean, that's the other thing.
But they're still registered for votes and to get their dole money and all that sort of thing. That's kind of where we're at now.
That kind of is where we're at. A completely dysfunctional state. Let's take a little trip down memory lane. Julie Hartley-Brewer is here with the first gaffe of the Friday today.
Are we looking at either massive more spending cuts or tax rises in the spring from the Chancellor?
She's certainly got big decisions to make in the spring, Julia, I would say. It's not just pundits like me, some of us qualified economists, unlike some other people in public life I could mention. It's not just pundits like me who are saying this.
Liam Halligan, of course. I missed that one. I didn't see it when it happened.
Neither did I.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to say, really. I'm speechless.
Yes, I'd love to know the context.
Yeah,
so if you are Julie Hartley-Brewer and you're listening and you want to let us know what was going on there.
0344 499 1000 is the number. Let's have a look at The Sun, page 7. The child killer, this is a Liverpool child killer who shot that terrible, was involved in that terrible situation where a young 7-year-old girl was shot dead. Basically, he's gone into prison. His name, Olivia Pratt-Corbell is her name. He's gone into prison and he's apparently been busted for allegedly dealing drugs and having an illegal mobile phone, which tells you everything you need to know about the way the prison system works.
Yeah, this is Thomas Cashman, who was sort of a bigwig in the Merseyside underworld.
Obviously still is.
Yeah, well, and that's often the way that these things work, actually. I can't remember where it was. Everybody knows in the UK that Albanians run the cocaine trade in the UK, but there's one part of the UK where they don't, and it's Merseyside, and that sort of extended area. It's a hotbed of organised criminal activity. To be fair, Merseyside
Even
police...
too scary for the Albanians.
Well, exactly, but Merseyside police are one of the few functioning police forces in this country. They actually turn up to things, not like in London where, as far as you're aware, the Met don't exist, but it's quite... There's a lot of stuff that goes on there, and I'm not surprised at all that this individual is a bigwig in prison, because... the breakdown in law and order is not just on the streets here. We all know what actually goes on in our prison system.
It is awful, though, isn't it, that we have, as you say, a completely sort of dysfunctional economy, a dysfunctional NHS, a dysfunctional government, a dysfunctional civil service, a dysfunctional prison service. What's the point of even putting people into prison if they're just going to operate as gangsters?
I mean, you were joking earlier about Starmograd. It's almost like it's some sort of Soviet satellite state where it is just gangsterism. If this was a Latin American country and you were describing how it runs, people would go, yeah, that sounds about right. But the UK?
Yeah,
really?
I know.
And it happens so quickly.
That's how bad it is. And it wasn't like this 5 years ago. I don't know what to say. Benedict, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk to the Shadow Farming Minister, Robbie Moore. We're going to go to Germany to find out what's going on. And we've got lots more...
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on Palmer, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has approved.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 7:03. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Of course, we've got much to do. Rachel Reeves back in the news because it turns out that the story that you thought had gone away, which is basically that she lied on her CV. She told a few untruths about what she did at the Bank of England, how long she was there for, what she did at HBOS when she was working up in Yorkshire, how she managed to get through several years of training to be an economist, only to be kind of, shall we say, questioned about it, certainly over her expenses when she was at HBOS, and certainly over the way that she misrepresented herself on her CV. If you're watching on TV right now, you can see how she changed her LinkedIn reference to say that at the first point she worked at the Bank of England for a decade or so. We're going to be playing you loads and loads of clips about the history of this, because at the end of the day, the sort of integrity of the Chancellor of the Exchequer is a very important thing. It's one thing if you're running, a market stall somewhere and you don't mind whether people think that you did an incredible run of 10 years in the army and you were a teacher for 12 years and you were running one of the most incredible businesses that anybody had ever seen. But when you actually work in government, when you actually pay lip service to being somebody who is to be trusted, somebody who is all over the place, and when it comes to the Chancellor's job, when you're supposed to be somebody who knows how the economy runs, she's actually said as much. I think this is a massive, massive problem for the Labour government, because Keir Starmer, we know, has been very economical with the truth about a whole bunch of stuff over the course of time. He's lied and lied and lied about what he was going to do, things he said he was going to do which he didn't do, and I think we now have to admit that the culture inside this Labour government is one of untruths, one of covering over the facts, one of pretending that one thing is true when in fact it turns out that something completely different actually happened. The front page of the Daily Mail today, Reeves under pressure to come clean on her expenses. Kemi Badenoch's asking for the Treasury to actually reveal exactly why she left this job at HBOS, exactly what was the investigation into whether she was using too many taxis, charging too many things to the company credit card, whether she was buying handbags for her boss, whether she was buying flowers, perfume, gifts, all sorts of things. It tells you that if you're fiddling your expenses, what on earth are you doing running what would be normally considered to be a very responsible job in the government, the second probably most important job that anybody could ever imagine. imagine? We're going to talk to Alan Tolhurst, Chief Reporter at Politics Home, and also Robbie Moore, the Shadow Farming Minister, is here. Sir Keith Starmer went out to meet a few people the other day, yesterday in fact, to talk about how he was going to build Starmergrad in various different parts of the country. We talked a lot about that yesterday. Just imagine what Starmer's community would look like. And he got interrupted and kind of kiboshed by a bunch of farmers protesting against what it was that he wants to introduce and what Rachel Reeves wants to introduce, the inheritance tax, which is going to cripple an awful lot of their businesses. And instead of talking to them, instead of engaging with them, he ran off, jumped in his Range Rover and got driven back to London. What a complete and utter plank. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We've got Gaff Friday going on. We've got voice notes all over the place as well. Lisa says this, Mike, your show is just the best thing that's on all day long. Doesn't all this culture in the government start at the top? If Rachel from Complaints goes, surely Free Gear has also got to take responsibility. The circus continues. Absolutely right. I think people are sick to death of it. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. And as Sean points out, Mike, don't forget that Rachel Reeves also had her parliamentary credit card taken off her for misuse. Now, the proof is out there. She lives up to her name. Rachel Reeves, says Sean in Gloucester. I mean, it's a terribly bad look. I don't know how on earth this woman can continue in such a responsible role as Chancellor of the Exchequer, the person who is supposed to hold the purse strings of the nation, a woman who has been accused of fiddling her expenses, a woman who had her credit card inside of the House of Commons stopped because she was overspending on it and she didn't pay any of the money back. She later did pay the £4,000 back. But, you know, this is a woman who clearly doesn't understand money, doesn't get money. Maybe you might even say she isn't very good with money. I've written a piece of the Daily Telegraph, which will be out later on today, which says exactly that. Rachel Reeves isn't very good with money. Trouble is, she's the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Let's talk to Alan Tolhurst. Alan, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
I mean, how have they managed to find the most ridiculous woman to be Chancellor of the Exchequer? I mean, Keir Starmer was so pleased, wasn't he, when he introduced her? Women and girls will be so excited to look up to her. She's a woman, he went, you know, and we can play you that clip in a minute. He was absolutely thrilled to make the first woman Chancellor his appointment, and his appointment alone, as if he was some kind of, you know, genie with magic powers. And it's all gone horribly wrong, and this woman cannot shake off her past because she's lied about it.
Yeah, it's really not a good look, is it? And I think, you know, what's interesting about this story is this big investigation by the BBC is that it doesn't really have a sort of a conclusion. It isn't able to tell us what happened at the end of this potential investigation into Rachel Reeves and two other people at HBOS, and obviously that leaves an awful lot of questions unanswered, and that is quite an unsatisfying kind of end to it. And I think, you know, the statement from the Treasury at the moment is that she was not aware that she was being investigated, and she says that she left on good terms.
Well, she says she doesn't remember it, which is not quite the same thing. It's a bit like Angela Rayner saying, you know, she doesn't recognise the statement which was put to her, which is quoted in the book Get In, where she said that she didn't think Keir Starmer could run a bath. She didn't deny saying it, she just didn't recognise it. Similarly, Rachel Reeves doesn't remember being investigated. It's not quite the same as saying, I wasn't.
Right, but the fact that there isn't, the fact that there haven't been able, no one's been able to produce the results of this potential investigation, I think, you know, makes it more difficult. And I mean, obviously, insiders have said that, look, there's a reason why if she took redundancy and you sign an NDA, there's clearly something more going on. And I do think there is going to have to be further explanation of it. I don't think at the moment, there's some pretty awful details in there. I don't think it's necessarily a kind of a smoking gun. And I know that from people I've spoken to, you know, in Number 10, that they're pretty keen to kind of push past this, I think.
But they're pretty keen to push past everything. But the trouble is, it wouldn't matter if Rachel Reeves was simply, you know, the MP for somewhere in South Yorkshire. It wouldn't matter, probably, even if she was Secretary of State for Health. But she doesn't happen to be any of those things. She's the Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is the whole point of this investigation, in a way, because she's the woman who supposedly controls the nation's purse strings. And if she's even been investigated for fiddling her expenses, and if she has had a crooked history or a difficult history with money, which it appears that she has, and a rather odd relationship with the truth, I think it's a massive problem.
Yeah, and she's incredibly integral to the kind of political side of this party, because, you know, as you mentioned, that book, it reveals a lot of the time that Keir Starmer himself is not particularly political. And I would say that Richard Reeves is much more political. And therefore, there was talk earlier this year about how bad things were going in the bond market, whether Richard Reeves was going to go. I thought it was always for the birds, because she's kind of she's such a key part of the way that her and Keir Starmer are in such lockstep around the economics and the politics of where this Labour Party wants to go. I think that it should be very low to ever kind of get rid of her. And so therefore, if something does come out of this, if we do hear more information, and I don't necessarily think this is going to be the last of it. I imagine the Sunday papers are working pretty hard on kind of follow-up stories around this. It's going to be pretty difficult for Keir Starmer to try and move on.
Yeah, I mean, it's all very well for him to keep saying I've got absolute confidence in her, but I mean, I would point you to the definition of fraud by misrepresentation, which happens to be a criminal offence. Now, I'm not saying she's committed a crime, but the definition is you tricked your employer into believing you incurred higher expenses than you actually did in order to make a financial gain. Now, there's no question that there's a whistleblower in this case who got very upset when he found out that Rachel Reeves was pretending that she was an economist at HBOS, when it turned out it wasn't, so that was the first lie. And the whistleblower then provided all sorts of information, I presume, to the BBC. They say they've seen papers which they haven't published, which they may yet publish, which could well be the smoking gun that you're talking about, in which it's been alleged that she was like basically buying gifts for her boss, who was signing off her expenses. Now, I don't know about you, but, I've worked in Fleet Street back in the good old days, as it were, when things like that were sort of a par for the course. But, we weren't running the country. But basically, you take your boss out for lunch, you have a very nice slap-up lunch, a couple of bottles of Prunier Montrachet, and then you give him the expenses to sign, and he signs them. That appears to be what was going on up in his HBOS place, and that's not what you're supposed to do with public money.
No, I mean, yeah, us journalists should not probably throw stones from our pretty glass houses about expenses. I remember once speaking to a journalist, and I said, met him in a restaurant, and there was no one sat opposite him, but there was another plate of food, and he said, "Have you met my managing editor?" to the empty chair, but
right. Yeah, no, I know. Listen, there are times when that sort of thing went on, and it may well be that Rachel Reeves took part in all of that. But the fact is that I'm sitting here hosting a radio show, which happens to be on television as well. She's the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and she's got to be, I'm afraid, cleaner than clean, whiter than white, if you like.
Well, especially given that in opposition, the Labour Party under Keir Starmer, jumped all over, criticism of the Johnson administration and the Conservatives for being for what they saw as kind of malfeasance, and therefore when they came in, they said they were going to be whiter than white, they were going to do things differently. And
that's the other problem.
And if you saw what happened, obviously, with Lou Haig, who obviously was sacked as Transport Secretary, because it obviously sets a precedent that if something was proven against Rachel Reeves, it'd be very difficult for Keir Starmer to keep her in place. And I think, as I say, he would fight tooth and nail to keep hold of her. But I think if questions continue to be asked in this area, it's going to be more and more difficult. It's going to be more and more distracting. With huge financial decisions coming up, with the spending review, with the results of the OBR, Rachel Reeves is going to be the most important person in cabinet. And if these questions continue to hang over, it's going to be more and more difficult for her to do her job.
Well, exactly. And it might suit his purpose to get rid of her in a reshuffle, not because she's not doing the job in the Treasury, but because she's got all these questions being asked about her. Let's have a look at some of the clips that we've got for you. Beth Rigby here from Sky News grilling Rachel Reeves about her past.
In the manifesto, you criticised the Conservatives for taking the tax burden to a 70-year high. What is it now at the end of this Parliament after your budget? What will it be?
I'm being really straight with people. The tax burden overall goes up, but we've made decisions.
From where?
It's the highest burden of tax I recognise.
Yeah, sorry, that's not about her past. Let's go back to something that is about her past, and that's when she was interviewed, actually, on Good Morning Britain by Richard Madeley about her CV.
Why did you say that you'd worked at the Bank of England for a decade when, in fact, it was... Well, it wasn't even 6 years, it was 5. I mean, that's exaggeration, isn't it?
Well, I worked at the Bank of England for 6 years, between 2000 and 2006. I was employed by the Bank of England, including I spent just over a year at the British Embassy working in the economics section there, supporting the government and the bank.
Why did you say it was a decade?
Well, I think you're taking... I think it's one interview. I worked at the Bank of England for 6 years. I worked for then at Halifax Bank of Scotland, I think, for 3 years after that. I became an MP when I was 31. But I think in the end, people want to judge me on the job that I'm doing today as Chancellor of the Exchequer. I'm qualified to do this job, but in the end, people are going to judge me. Am I growing the economy? Am I improving their living standards? And I'm determined to do just that.
Yeah, well, she's not growing the economy and she's not improving people's living standards, so she fails on those two counts. Also, she really struggles there to actually not answer the question, and she's clearly being diversionary, she's clearly being shady, she's clearly being dodgy. You know, she basically, it's nothing to do with one interview in which she claimed to have worked there for 10 years. It was on her LinkedIn profile and her CV was there for all to see. It was a lie. And I've got this from Ronnie, who says, "Morning, Mike. I just looked up on Google. Rachel Reeves is a fraud. Lying on a CV can result in losing a job offer, damaging your reputation with potential employers, and in extreme cases could even lead to legal action, as it is considered to be fraud." I mean, this is not a minor thing here.
No, I think it obviously goes back to the fact that she became an MP quite young, and obviously she hadn't, I don't think, had as much experience as she would have liked in these kind of roles. So therefore, I think obviously some of that was kind of inflated. If you remember as well, there was an issue around a book that she published a couple of years ago.
Oh, that's right, yeah. She stole large portions of that book from somebody else.
Yeah, there was some stuff from
plagiarism.
Wikipedia. Yeah, stuff from Wikipedia. So it's just this kind of stuff, and it's kind of this feeling that necessarily she's not been as honest as she could be when she's in this kind of, as you say, incredibly high-profile role.
Right.
You know, does it affect her job as Chancellor? You know, not hugely.
Well,
but
it does, because being Chancellor is all about trust. And if you can't trust the person you're doing business with, and doing business with Britain basically is what every other country in the world is doing, if you're sitting opposite a woman who has basically spent her entire life lying and pretending to be something she's not, and faking her CV, and faking expenses, and basically, you know, plagiarising a book, I mean, I don't know what disqualifies her any more than all of those things.
Yeah, I'm not sure she's necessarily been lying all of her life. I'm not sure what she was like back then.
Well, she said she was a chess champion, and she came 26th in a chess championship in Lewisham.
Yeah, I think she was. Yeah, she was.
Well, that's a lie, isn't it?
No, I take your point. There have been more than.
She's a liar. Why don't you just say it, Alan? You know, you don't have to defend her. You're not here representing the Labour Party. No, you know, the woman is a congenital liar, a bit like Keir Starmer is. Keeps telling untruths, can't get away from it.
Well, I'm going to keep to my journalistic impartiality and not come down necessarily on either way. But I think your listeners, your viewers will have seen some of that evidence, and I think are obviously making their own minds up. And I think it puts the Labour Party, it puts Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer in a really difficult place when this is the last thing they want to be talking about.
Miss Reeves is said to have bought a £152 handbag on expenses as a Christmas gift for her boss in 2008, and her boss then signed off the expenses claim. You can be impartial if you want, but I think everybody can see there's no point. Thank you very much indeed. Alan Tolhurst, Chief Reporter at Politics Home. What an absolute and utter nightmare this woman is. Every dig of the spade reveals more treasure, array her CV and her background. I've got this message here from Bill in Cheshire. If her flexible CV prompts questions, there can be no questions regarding her performance as Chancellor. Surely, yes, she is absolutely useless, the worst Chancellor for an entire century. And Richard says Rachel from Accounts is economical with the truth. I don't want to be governed by people who tell constant lies. I said last week, I think, that Keir Starmer is basically a compulsive liar. He can't help it. Even in Prime Minister's Questions this week, he told a lie about the story regarding the family from Gaza. He made out that it was a government decision that was made before he was in the government. That was not true. Even John Rentoul had to correct him. So we're now led by people who are not only useless, but they're also liars. That's where we are. 18 minutes past 7.
Donald Trump had 2 goes. He sort of worked out...
The second go seems to be going
over
better
his
than
first
the first
term.
go.
And the second term, he had 3,500 people ready to go. Look at the amount of taxpayer money that's being spunked up against the wall.
Yeah.
They're going to cut that off. They're going to stop it. They're going to make sure that's redirected into what I would call as a vibrant, accountable private sector.
Yeah. One shot.
That's what we need.
4 years. One shot, 4 years. Nigel Farage, is he going to be the Prime Minister, yes or no?
Well, at the moment, he's got every chance of being the Prime Minister. I mean, we're leading the polls and he's leading reform.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:22. I'm Mike Graham. This from Sarah. Rachel Reeves as the first woman Chancellor is embarrassing for women. Frivolous wastage, lying about what's going on in the purse. No one knows where the money's going or gone. Lying about where she's been and what she was doing there. She ain't smashing no glass ceiling. She's reinforcing it along with gender stereotypes. Can't work out who's the most slippery between her and Starmer. What a pair of grifters. Well done, Rach. Well, it's absolutely true. Let's get a voice note from Chris.
Morning, Mike. Chris from Epsom. I'm just watching the interview with Rachel from wherever the hell she came from. She just said that she was at the Bank of England as an economist, then at HBOS. Well, you don't go from an economist, if you're successful or good at your job, to being customer services. What's going on?
Yeah. It's a very good point. I mean, I've made this argument all along. You know, the Bank of England's got many, many jobs in it. There are hundreds of people that work in it. The people that worked in the Bank of England would suggest to me that she was not what you might call a high-level economist. If she was involved in anything, she was involved in, you know, perhaps one sector of what the Bank of England did. She certainly spent some time at the American Embassy or the UK Embassy in America. She certainly spent some time at the London School of Economics and she trained to be an economist. But did she have a very key job at the Bank of England? I really don't think she did. And you're quite right, Chris. If you did have a brilliant big job at the Bank of England, why would you suddenly go to Yorkshire and get a job effectively working in the complaints department of a building society? Because that's kind of what's going on here. Absolutely incredible stuff. We're going to come back to the Rachel Reeves story. Also, just before we talk to our next guest, Robbie Moore, the shadow farming minister, Rob Hyde, who's a journalist based in Germany, is going to help us out with that story from yesterday. Just want to bring this to your attention. I tweeted out a piece yesterday after I visited Covent Garden for the first time in a while. Covent Garden, a very, very formerly busy part of London, is now almost deserted, right? And part of the problem with it is you can't get into it and out of it, because part of the problem is that the roads have been dug up to such an extent that there is simply no traffic going through. If you wanted to jump in a cab, say from Fleet Street or from maybe Oxford Circus to get down there, you can't actually drive up half of the roads because they're all closed off. They're all being dug up. But there was nobody working on them. And the response to my tweet was extraordinary. People from all over the place saying, that's exactly the same where they live. Glasgow, Donald MacLeod said, absolutely nothing compared to what's going on up here. Sandy from Suffolk said, to get from my house to Woodbridge, where she lives, takes 5 minutes in a car usually, but the roads have all been dug up. There's 3 different sets of temporary traffic lights. You know, the whole thing goes on and on and on. Diana from Chelmsford talks about it as well. People say that in every single part of the country, Bath is just one big roadblock after another. It says Bath Comms. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, what is going on? Why are there so many roadworks going on at the moment? And what is it all about? I know some people will say, oh, they've got to spend their budgets before they get to the end of March for the new tax year. But it seems to be worse than ever this year. just a thought. I just wanted to put that past you and put that into your thought process and see if you can tell me over the course of this show. You can call me, you can leave us a voice note, you can send us a message. You know, what is going on with the roads in this country? So many of them have been closed off. Let's talk to Rob Hyde, though, journalist based in Germany, because, of course, we're looking now at the aftermath of that terrible situation, another terrible incident where an Afghan national drove a car at some people in Munich, not a million miles away from where the Munich International Security Conference is going on today. Let's find out what the latest is. Rob, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed for talking to us. I mean, unfortunately, I'm afraid to say this is becoming a bit of a regular occurrence in Germany at the moment, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, we're only a couple of weeks away since we had the murderous attack in Aschaffenburg there at the Schöntal Park, where there was the stabbing, the two murders, and now we've got it again. Of course, just at Christmas we had Magdeburg. Yeah. And as I've listed before, there's just been so many incidents. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is. And what's the mood? I mean, there's a lot of injuries, I'm told, some of which are obviously very potentially life-changing, but luckily at the moment anyway, no fatalities.
No fatalities yet. There've been 28 wounded, some of them critically injured, and some of them children also. So there's an awful lot of unease and fear and anger, I think.
Yeah, because, I mean, I was watching a statement from the German police yesterday, and I was quite surprised because not only is it something that happened quite close to where this international conference is going on, but the police described the scene where the police were driving behind a lot of people who were sort of in the street. I think they were demonstrating against something. And then this car came from behind them, overtook them, and just ran into all the people. I mean, it doesn't sound very secure.
No, there certainly is that question, and I think since then an awful lot of the political parties, mainly those on the right, have been demanding increased security. The police have said that they're going to step things up in the same way that politicians really of all ilks and persuasions have now been using much more tougher talk in terms of how to crack down on illegal immigration and this sort of thing. I guess the question is just, is it going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it really is a terrible situation. But listen, thanks very much indeed for checking in with us, Rob Hyde, journalist based in Germany there. We're going to move on, but we will continue to talk about it because it is an international conference there, and Peter Carl is there from the Labour government, who's the technology minister. David Lammy is there. This is the second event of this week, by the way, though, that Keir Starmer hasn't gone to. Normally, he's the first man to jump on a private jet. He'd missed the AI conference in Paris. He's now missing the security conference in Munich, having decided instead to send 3 members of his cabinet. I wonder whether all of those people will have gone on a private jet. They probably have. Robbie Moore's here, though. He's the Shadow Farming Minister. Robbie, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to talk to you, Robbie. Thanks very much for being here. Keir Starmer had a bit of a run-in with the farmers yesterday. He went off to try and explain to everybody what his great idea was to create these new towns that he wants to call, new communities, place to live. I call them Starmergrad. I'm not really particularly looking forward to living in one of them. But have a look at what happened to him when he went up to try and announce it when the farmers saw him.
It must be really incredible to be part of building, I mean, actually here, not just building houses, but building a community.
I mean, he's got no instinct for this job, has he? I mean, Robbie, whether or not you agree with what he's doing, surely to hell he should have just got out of the car and gone and spoken to a couple of the farmers and said, look, here's why we're doing it. This is the reason we're doing it. I realise that some of you don't like it, but let me persuade you as to what you can do to sort of get around it or something. But just to get in a car and drive away is ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, it is absolutely, and it just demonstrates that this government is not listening or indeed facing up to the catastrophic consequences that their choices, their decisions are making. And it's not just the Prime Minister that is not engaging with our farmers and those professional organisations that are representing our farmers. The Chancellor isn't either. I mean, just this week, I was responding as the Shadow Farming Minister to a petition debate on Monday where 148,000 people had signed a petition from the farming community urging the government to change the family farm tax to axe it, but yet the farming minister didn't even turn up to this debate. Steve Reed, as the Secretary of State, didn't even turn up. In fact, it was left to a junior Treasury minister to respond to the debate. So what the Prime Minister has indicated, that he is not up for engaging, not up for listening to the implications that his family farm tax is going to have, because it's going to be detrimental not only to our farming community, but UK food production, and indeed, I believe, will lead to increased food prices as a result.
Yeah, absolutely right. And, you know, I haven't seen really a more kind of dedicated and sort of, you know, bound together series set of people as the farmers, you know. And they're being reasonable. They're not doing anything terrible. They're just saying, look, you know, we need to exist. We need to be able to make money in order just to keep going. We're not in receipt of bucket loads of money. And the simple question as well is that it looks as though Rachel Reeves has got her facts wrong and her figures wrong, and the Treasury figures actually are even different, and the Department of Agriculture figures are different, and the farmers say that, you know, more of them are affected than the government says, and they simply won't back down or even go. I mean, it would be surely sensible for them to say, look, all right, our calculations were off a little bit, but we still want to go after these people, just not everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And the policy announcement that they brought out with the implications and agricultural property relief and business property relief is only bringing into the Treasury about £500 million, which is not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. Let's face it, when you look at the negative consequences that this is going to have on UK food production. So what the government need to do is get around the table with our farming community, properly understand those implications, change course, and axe this family farm tax. And what's more harrowing about this is the cut-off date of April 26. You know, I have spoken to many in the farming community, some in of an older population, some in very ill health, that are saying to me that they are deeply concerned that if they pass away before April 26, no IHT bill will be experienced. But if they pass away after April 26, some of those families will be left with a tax bill of well over £1 million, something that they just simply will not be able to afford.
Yeah.
And the government need to understand these challenges very, very quickly.
They really do, because otherwise it just feels as if they're victimising people because they don't like them. And that's kind of how it looks. It looks like they don't understand the countryside, they don't understand farming, they don't understand people who make a living off the land, because, you know, it doesn't happen in Westminster. I mean, it does feel like that, doesn't it?
Well, without doubt, we have a city-dwelling government. Let's be very clear about this. All of the DEFRA ministers are not from the rural sector. They don't understand farming. That's been clear in the policy decisions that they've made, which is fair enough. But at least get out there and engage and try to understand those challenges. I mean, just this week, the farming minister at the Norfolk Farming Conference admitted to the audience base, which was the farming community, that farming is low on this government's pecking order. So clearly, this is a government that is not interested in UK food production, not interested in backing our farming community. But I can tell our farmers, as a farmer myself before becoming and entering in Westminster in 2019, we will absolutely be on our farming community side as the Conservative Party.
Let me just ask you a quick question before I let you go about Rachel Reeves. She's on the front pages again this morning, Robbie, because apparently there seems to be some discrepancy about her history. And we know that she's already faked her CV. She's corrected that. She hasn't really explained why she faked it. It now turns out that she was at the centre of some kind of expenses scandal when she was working at HBOS, another place where she said she worked in a job which turned out not to be right, not to be true. I mean, how is it possible for a Chancellor of the Exchequer, one of the chief jobs in this country, which involves surely an awful lot of trust and an awful lot of kind of, you know, faith in her economical, you know, abilities, we've got a woman in charge, it would seem, who doesn't have a very good relationship with the truth?
Well, absolutely, and this is somebody who's probably one of the most important and powerful people in government, in charge of everyone's taxpayers' pound that has been coming into the Treasury, yet we've now seen these controversies around not only her CV, but also the expenses linked to her time at HBOS before she became an MP. Now, this is worrying because this is not only her altering her CV to make her look better, but also there seems to be a very murky scenario that is existing around her expenses claims and how she was effectively using the company's own finances to reward individuals, much against that company's policy. So, look, this is very dodgy, very murky, and the Chancellor just needs to own up and own up about what she's been doing, rather than sending ministers out onto the airwaves trying to justify her position.
Has anyone asked to see her expenses from her time in the in Downing Street?
Well, look, I mean, this just shines a light on the type of people that we have unfortunately now got at the top of government. We've got a Chancellor that has effectively told the whole nation that she was involved at the Bank of England for 10 years or a good part of a decade, but actually it was half that. We now see these allegations being reported by the BBC and others around her expenses. This is all very murky and just clearly demonstrates that we do not have people at the top of government that generally have the best interests of not only their own self-preservation at heart, but indeed how you go about enacting the very heart of decent, respectable governance, in my view.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. Good to talk to you. Robbie Moore, Shadow Farming Minister, thank you very much indeed. Former farmer, of course, unlike many of the people in the Labour government who want to kill off farming. None of them have actually been farmers. None of them know at all what is going on. By the way, we're going to be checking out Rachel Reeves' expenses claims because I think now is the time. And I think you'll find that in the past, Rachel Reeves has claimed for a heating allowance in her home from the taxpayer. And I think you'll probably find that now that she's Chancellor of the Exchequer, she gets a whole load of other expenses claims. You remember when she gave an interview and said that one of the things she liked doing was to nick the pastries from the very early morning meetings that she had. This is a woman who clearly has a very, very loose association with the truth, thinks that she can cut corners, thinks that she can do whatever she wants, whenever she wants. It's absolutely extraordinary. Coming up, we're going to speak to Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. We'll ask him what's going on with Trump and Putin, and also what the big weekend is going to be like coming up in the Middle East. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Now, here's a thing of some interest to you. I've just had a quick look, as you can do, to find out what Rachel Reeves' expenses were over the course of the last 3 to 4 years, from 2020 to 2023, shall we say. So that's 3 parliamentary years, right? 3 parliamentary years encountered. Do you know how much she's claimed in expenses from the public purse? More than £700,000, right? According to They Work For You, which is something everybody can look up, and they have to register all of their interest there. Accommodation, this is in 2020, accommodation, £13,802. MP travel, £1,264. Office costs, £27,827. Staffing, £192,264. Now, I'm sure that she needs an awful lot of staff because she's got to cover all those lies that she made up and get them to try and cover for her whenever she comes out and says anything. 2021 to 2022, staffing, £204,000. That went up a bit. Office costs, £26,478. That went down a bit. MP travel, £4,158. Massive. In 2022 to 2023, staffing levels went up to £218,568. I'm sure she obviously gave her people working for her a pay rise. That's nice of her. Office costs £23,357. I mean, are these people taking the mickey? I mean, this is all public money, right? She's getting up to about £800,000 over the course of the last 3 years, in addition to lying about her past, making up things on her CV. And this is a woman who's supposed to be in charge of the government coffers and the nation's economy and the future of our stability. I think it's time for her to go, isn't it? Let's get a voice note from Brian.
Morning, Mike. Brian from Southend. Happy Friday. So, Rachel Reeves doesn't remember being investigated. You know, how can you not, remember that? That is something that's a lifelong thing that will never leave you, isn't it? If you're being investigated for something, very strange.
Mm.
But then again, this Labour is what their party's all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lies, lies and lies.
Yeah. Here lies Rachel Reeves, and lies and lies and lies. I mean, that's it, isn't it, unfortunately? Let's talk to Philip Ingram, former Senior Military Intelligence Officer. Philip, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. Let me just play you a little quick clip. It's Sebastian Gorka, who's now back in the White House, my old friend, who's now the director of counter-terrorism, I believe, being interviewed by the BBC. And let's see what he had to say.
Look at what support we have given the Ukrainians in the last 3 years.
It's huge.
I don't think any. Again, you're interrupting me, and it's really not done. At the end of the day, we stand with any nation that wishes to implement its sovereignty and which shares our values. And we know that those amongst our civilization that share our values understand, and we stand next to them shoulder to shoulder.
But not the women killed in the maternity hospital in southern Ukraine.
Is that a serious statement? I mean, do you really have
May
no
I finish
shame?
my sentence now,
No
please?
shame. You have no
Not
shame.
the
That
women
is beneath the BBC.
The women
As someone
killed
who
in the
grew up
maternity
on
hospital.
The products of the BBC. That is absolutely
The families killed
shameful.
in their own apartments
Shameful.
in the capital.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
The
making
people
such a statement.
eating in a
I am
pizza
not even
place.
going to countenance replying to such an absolutely abhorrent statement.
Victoria, Derbyshire, not making any friends there. They do seem oddly obsessed about certain parts of wars, certain parts of news stories, but not others. Philip, I mean, lots of people think that Donald Trump might have pushed the boat out a little bit too far here, but there's no question that at least what he's done is he's got people talking about a solution to all of this, hasn't he?
He has, and when you get into the detail of what's been said, it's really the Zelensky plan that was given to Donald Trump's team being put back out there, but with certain elements taken off it. So Zelensky had said he couldn't see a way that the Ukrainians were going to win from a tactical perspective on the ground. He would be willing to come up with some form of solution that allowed the disputed Donbass and Crimea to remain under or not under Ukrainian control, provided there were security guarantees that included NATO membership given to Ukraine if it stopped the war. Now, the only bit that hasn't been agreed to is the NATO membership. But again, what this has been used to do is to bring Putin to the negotiating table. Zelensky's been proposing plans to the Trump team before Trump got inaugurated. Putin's now coming into the table, and this is a starting point. There have been threats overnight to Putin. If he doesn't agree to things, the Americans have said, we'll put boots on the ground, we'll attack you. We're seeing this this aggressive negotiation that Trump is infamous for.
Yeah, and I mean, is it bluster? Is it sensible? Is it, in your view, something that will work eventually?
Is it bluster? Yes. Is it sensible from a diplomatic perspective and international norms? No, because it's stimulating a lot of people panicking about different things. Are there good bits to it? Yes. Are there ways that could be done better? Possibly, but we've only just started this process. It's only the last couple of days that we've had Pete Hegseth, the US Secretary of State for Defence, come out with a statement. We've got more meetings going on at the Munich Security Conference today, and we'll see what comes out of that. So it's almost too early to call.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And this weekend as well, just to quickly, before we let you go, lots of eyes on the Middle East as to what's going to happen. People tell me that there might be at least a slight softening of the approach by Israel and the United States of America in the wake of Hamas possibly agreeing to release the hostages.
Yeah, Hamas will release, I think 3 or 4 hostages this weekend, as was the original agreement. I don't think they're going to release all the hostages, as Donald Trump said that they must do, and Prime Minister Netanyahu agreed with, and Hamas will try and keep the original ceasefire deal going as much as they can. Again, this is down to bullying from Trump. He's got a different approach to international deals and international negotiations.
Well, I'm all for him bullying Hamas. I think that's a great idea. Thank you very much indeed, Philip Ingham, former senior military intelligence officer there, on the state of the international kind of nervousness, if you like, about what's going to happen over Ukraine, what's going to happen over Gaza. Coming up, we'll have another gaffe for you. Also, we're going to find out about that story we talked about yesterday, heat pumps being installed by councils all over the country. Your money being wasted for people who don't actually want what they're being given. Ridiculous. This is Talk.
She got into a cab with her partner and one of them had vomited in the taxi. So the taxi driver was very upset about this and some sort of argument ensued and the cab driver decided to drive straight to the police station. In this, a window was kicked in, as I understand it, by one of the women. And that's what caused this moment to arrive on the desk of the humble PC, who discovered he was white and stupid.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. It's coming up to 7:51 and we have got 2 more hours to go looking at an awful lot of things this morning. We're going to speak in a moment to William Yarwood from the Taxpayers Alliance. We've got a gaffe, though, for you, a quick one. This is one of mine, I think. Oh, no, sorry. It's Jeremy Kyle.
To the phone lines, Gloucestershire. Sally, good afternoon. You're on Talk Drive. How are you?
Hello, Jeremy. I'm fuming, actually, because you don't.
Can we... Sorry, I have this... It's not your fault, darling. Can you move your mouth back from the phone? I can't understand a word, sweet. I'm so sorry.
Is that better?
A little bit, yes. Go on. What do you want to say?
What it is, Jeremy, I'm bloody fuming because I'm a dog walker. But it's not that, Jeremy. It's understanding. Both Dave and I, both from farming backgrounds.
Who's Dave?
You've got to absolutely bloody understand.
Who's Dave?
You know, about animals.
Sally, wind up. Hold on a minute. Who's Dave? Where's Dave gone?
My husband.
I didn't know that. You just added Dave into the conversation. Dave could have been the dog.
I'm on his phone.
Dave, the husband, there we are. How about this from Nordy, who says, I was in a mid-sized town in Romania a few years ago. They needed new water pipes running along the town centre road. Hundreds of workers formed an ant column of efficiency. The front was digging, the middle was installing the pipe, and the rear was resurfacing the road. They were done in 2 days. Yeah, well, that's not what happens here. I'm going to be talking more about the state of our roads coming up very shortly. But let's talk about the state of our councils with William Yarwood. William, very good morning to you. We had a very interesting caller yesterday who revealed to us, and I thought I'd sort of uncorked some kind of incredible story that not everybody knows about how local councils around the country are installing heat pumps in people's houses without them really being asked if they want them. Heat pumps and solar panels, indeed. So if you're in social housing in many parts of Britain, you'll be getting a knock on the door and somebody trying to put a heat panel in, a heat pump rather, and a solar panel. And the other persons who get them are people on benefits, apparently.
Well, good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, it's interesting how councils will find the time to do something like this, but actually can't collect your bins or indeed fill potholes. Right. So I find it very interesting how councils have time to do this. And also where they're getting the money from. You know, where on earth are they getting the money from? They're constantly complaining about the fact that they have zero money and have to raise council tax on local residents in order to pay for vital services. But last time I looked, forcing locals to have heat pumps, many of whom do not want these things, is not a vital service.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, I mean, you know, we've been told basically that pensioners are getting knocks on the door when they've got perfectly good double glazing to find that they want their windows replaced. You know, and quite frankly, these councils who haven't got any money to begin with haven't got this money to spend, have they?
No, that they certainly don't. But the interesting thing about the heat pump thing more broadly is actually maybe one of the reasons they're forcing this on people is actually many people aren't taking up heat pumps voluntarily, despite the fact that the government's given a level of grants to to give people these kind of heat pumps. Because actually the National Audit Office just last year complained that the uptake in heat pumps wasn't good enough because it wasn't meeting our climate carbon targets. But quite frankly, I don't blame ordinary people for not wanting heat pumps. They're expensive. They're noisy. The majority of people do not have the kind of cash to splash on heat pumps, despite the money they might get given by the government. So actually, in a way, this is just another story in our net zero fantasy where people aren't taking things up naturally. So government has to intervene and force ordinary people to do what they want to do rather than what ordinary people want to do, which is have cheaper energy bills and actually manage their heat and their electricity the way they want to.
And according to the guy that rang us yesterday, they're not being installed properly either, and so therefore they actually install them and then they don't work, so people are very unhappy about it and their houses are cold as a result.
Yeah, again, that's not a surprise. And actually, heat pumps are not suitable for every houses, especially old houses. And they don't have the infrastructure in them to actually fit these things in. But once again, I mean, this is part of just the wider net zero zealotry we're experiencing in this country at the moment. I mean, our very own Energy Security Secretary, Ed Miliband's very big on heat pumps. So much so that actually in April, a new heat pump boiler tax will be introduced thanks to Miliband's push, which basically is going to fine companies for not meeting their requirements requirements for giving people heat pumps.
Right.
So not only are people going to be forced to get heat pumps, but actually there's now an incentive for companies to try and force these things on people. Otherwise, they're going to get taxed by the government for not meeting the net zero targets. It's utterly crazy.
It
Just
is
leave
absolutely
people
mad,
alone.
isn't it? Let me just ask you one more thing, William, about another story that I've sort of picked up on, which is the state of our roads, not just the pothole problem, but the fact that so many roads are being dug up currently. I mean, I was in Covent Garden this week. I was also in Mayfair, and the number of roads that are just sort of completely and utterly closed off now that you couldn't drive in. I mean, luckily I wasn't driving, I was walking. But, you know, if you're in any kind of, you know, modified carriage of any kind, whether it's a taxi, whether you're trying to drive somewhere in a van, trying to deliver things, I mean, there are huge swathes of London that are just dug up and you can't go into. And similarly, I'm getting messages from all over the country. I've got messages from Glasgow coming in, from Manchester, from Norfolk, from Suffolk, from, you know, the West Country. There seems to be a sort of, you know, mad dash to just dig up everything that we've got and paralyse the road system.
Yeah, it's completely crazy, and the element of this is where the government says that there's absolutely no money, but they've got money to open new quangos, they've got money to give inflation-busting pay rises to bureaucrats, they've got money to try and force heat pumps on people, and yet they're not actually doing the basics, which is making sure that the roads are open, they're clean, they work, and that motorists can get back and forth from where they're going to. I mean, imagine how hard it is for, you know, a mother trying to take kids to school, or, you know, a self-employed person who spends a lot of the time in their van delivering things around. That's affecting people's normal lives. That's affecting people's businesses. And actually, when you mention about closed off roads, I learned the story just the other week of in Wiltshire. There's £400,000 being spent by the local council to protect a closed road, which they basically refuse to open for whatever reason. They're protecting it from, you know, speed races and boy races and things like that. Actually, how about we just open the road and allow people to, you know, move on and get on with their daily business? But again, it's just another element of broken Britain. You know, there's enough money for heat pumps, there's enough money for net zero zealotry and bureaucrats in Whitehall, but there's not enough money to just fix the basic things.
It is incredible, isn't it? William, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. William Yarwood from the Taxpayers Alliance there, keeping an eye on things for us. I've got this from Donald McLeod up in Glasgow. He says 3 years of continual roadworks with roads being dug up, narrowed, bike lanes installed and turned into high-speed delivery expressways, all paid for by anti-car charity Quango Sustrans, who were given hundreds of millions in government funding. Congestion's at an all-time high. This is all in Glasgow. Parking's been removed. Where there is places, charging has increased by 30% for parking. LEZ fines, which of course are low emission zone fines, and unreliable public transport which can't move either. 3 million visitors down since the work started. Business is on its knees. A 12-week project to re-pedestrianise Sucky Hall Street is now 18 months behind the schedule, and the digging continues. I mean, it sounds like an absolute nightmare up there in Glasgow, but there are parts of London that are in the same way, in the same terrible place. Ridiculous, isn't it? What is going on? Who gives these bozos permission to just completely not only dig up roads, but close them off so that nobody can actually go down them? I mean, when I was in Covent Garden, there were several roads. One of them was Maiden Lane, where there's a very big and famous restaurant called Rules, where you can't even actually, you can't walk out of Rules and cross the road because there's a big fence there. And all you can do is walk down part of the pavement. They can't get deliveries. They can't get custom. Nobody's walking down the road. It's horrible. It's a bad situation. It's noisy. It's smoky. It's just dreadful. Steve says this: don't forget the 99,000 given as a donation in kind to Rachel Reeves and Ed Miliband before the election by the Green Finance Institute. As soon as elected, Miliband stops oil and gas licensing. Reeves sets up National Wealth Fund, chaired by the CEO of, you guessed it, the Green Finance Institute. There's something going on, isn't there? And it stinks to high heaven. I mean, Rachel Reeves couldn't lie straight in bed. She's told lies about her CV. She's been involved in filling her expenses, and she won't come clean. Apart from that, she's an ideal candidate to be Chancellor of the Exchequer. What an absolute joke. This is Morning Glory. Back after this.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come
England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has approved.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 8. The sun is up, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Valentine's Day. It is, of course, February the 14th. If you've got anything going on later on, good luck to you. I hope you've got the flowers organised now, because if you're trying to get them today, they might charge you an arm and a leg. But never mind. It's certainly not a very happy love-up day for Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who is once again at the centre of a probe, because Kemi Badenoch wants her to come clean on her expenses scandal. It turns out that when she was working up at HBOS, the Halifax Bank of Scotland job that she had, which she said originally was as an economist, turned out later on it was just a job in retail banking, head of complaints. She wasn't the head of complaints because she had a boss, but it turns out, as you heard there on the news, that one of the things that she got involved in was spending quite a lot of money to support a lifestyle which included taxis everywhere, flowers, perfume, handbags, meals out, all that sort of thing, expenses which were signed off by her boss, who was the recipient of some of the gifts that she bought for that same boss. There's obviously something amiss here. There's obviously something murky, but basically Keir Starmer says there's nothing to see here. I've got absolute faith in Rachel Reeves, notwithstanding the fact that she has been found guilty previously of plagiarising a book, not least found guilty of faking her own CV and making up things about the Bank of England job that she had, where she said she was there for 10 years and she wasn't, only there for 5 and a bit. Lied and lied and lied and lied. Also, of course, you might remember she had her House of Commons credit card taken off her because she hadn't paid the bill. It was nicked off her and it was cancelled until she paid the £4,000 that she owed. This is not a woman who should be in charge of the nation's purse strings, ladies and gentlemen. Keir Starmer, of course, is very happy that she's in the job because she's not a bloke.
When Rachel Reeves stands up, she will be making history. And I can tell you, young women and girls across the country will be watching, they will look up, and they will notice.
Yeah, they'll notice that she can't do the bleeding job, and they'll notice that she's completely and utterly useless. Darryl says, Rachel from accounts, what has she got on Starmer to be able to stay in office? Seems that her working career is a litany of lies and needs some serious investigation. Well, this is the problem. We seem to be being governed by a government of people who care not for the truth whatsoever. You know, Keir Starmer has lied and lied and lied. He lied to get into office. He's lied all the way through, so far, his prime ministership. He's promised to do things that he hasn't done, and he's done things that he promised not to do. Apart from that, he's a very fine, upstanding gentleman. Of course, he went off to try and organise and speak about Starmergrad, you know, his great idea to rehouse people in new towns all over the country. But he got interrupted by some farmers, and then he ran away. didn't talk to the farmers, just got in his car, his Range Rover, with his bodyguards, and was swept off so that he didn't have to talk to the pesky members of the public. Absolutely not. He wouldn't want that. Coming up, we'll also be talking about Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. We'll be talking as well about what's going on at the Munich Security Conference, where they're having a conversation about what happens with Ukraine. Also, there's a new migrant scandal, a Ghanaian woman who apparently is going to stay in this country after she managed to get married in a wedding that she didn't even attend. Absolutely ridiculous. 0344 499 1000. Also, Labour wants a Windrush czar for £130,000 a year. Give me a small break. This is Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. Let's get it on. Bev in Huddersfield says, morning, Mike, we can't even call her Rachel from accounts, as that would imply she knows about figures and numbers. Well, it would. We're also talking this morning about two things. One, what councils are doing with your money. Apparently they're spending it on putting heat pumps into people's houses who haven't asked for them, and putting solar panels into houses, social housing in particular, that nobody wants. That's where all the money's going. Also, we're talking about the ridiculous state of our roads. Roads being dug up all over the country. If you've got a story for us about a road that's being dug up, we want to hear it. I can tell you about a story in Bexhill in Sussex, where they've just announced that they're going to close a road, which is an access road to the beach, by the way, one where I take my dog on a regular basis. It's going to be shut for an entire year because they're doing some gaswork repairs. An entire year, they say the road's going to be closed for. Imagine if you lived there. Absolutely unbelievable. Now, just before we speak to Kevin Schofield, political editor of the HuffPost, let's give you yet another exclusive that we've done so many of here in recent times at Talk. This is exclusive footage that we've managed to get smuggled out of Downing Street. This is one of the early cabinet meetings that they had just after they got into power.
Paint the whole world with a rainbow. That's very good. Come on, Bungle, put that comic away, because we're going to have a game of ball.
I don't want to play ball, thank you, Zippy. I'm quite happy as I am.
Yeah, but I've decided that we're going to play ball, and we're all going to throw it to each other, and then what we... Zippy, I don't want to play ball either. I don't feel like it, because I am drawing. Yeah, but you must, George.
Just a minute, Zippy. Why must he?
Well, because I want to play. Look, I can't throw a ball to someone if there's no one to throw it to, now can I?
Then you'll just have to think of something else to do, won't you, Zippy? Yes, you will, Zippy, because I don't want to play ball, and George doesn't want to play ball either.
Oh.
You'll just have to think of something else to do. And you can imagine what that something else was. I know, says David Lammy, let's sell off the Chagos Islands. And Angela Rayner says, no, that's a bad idea. I think what we should do is instead make the pensioners pay for their fuel. And let's just take away the pensioners' heating allowance. And then somebody else pops up, maybe Rachel Reeves, and says, no, I think we should put VAT on the schools, those public schools that all those rich people send their toffee-nosed kids to. Let's do that. I mean, it's not that far from the truth, is it? 9 minutes past 8. Let's talk to Kevin Schofield. Kevin, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Now, I know that you probably expect it to be treated slightly more seriously than that, but at the end of the day, I can imagine that this is kind of the conversations that go on in Downing Street. I don't really want to do that. I can't think of anything else to do. Have you got any ideas? They've already asked for people to give them ideas. You know, it's all a bit of a shambles, isn't it?
Well, that took me right back to when I was a little kid. I was a huge Rainbow fan, I have to say, when I was little. But, well, yeah, it's not been a great start, I think.
It's really not. And it's not a start anymore, either. We're 7 months in, maybe 8 months in. You know, what's going on?
No, you're right. I mean, good news as far as the government is concerned is hard to come by. They've lost another minister there at the weekend on the back of Tulip Sadiq, Louise Haigh. We've been hearing people that I speak to in government, for months and months now, we're going to get back on the front foot. We had the budget was they were going to get back on the front foot. The Labour Party conference last September, they were going to get back on the front foot. Marking the first 100 days, then they were going to get back on the front foot. And yet here we are, they're still struggling to just come up with a positive story as to what this government is actually trying to achieve.
Yeah, no, I've been speaking to people, obviously, as you would expect, ever since they got in. And people are genuinely, particularly people from the right, are saying, look, we thought that they would do things that we wouldn't agree with. We thought that they would do things we wouldn't like. We really weren't prepared for them to be this bad at just the business of government.
Yeah, and we thought, you know, they won a landslide, so you got a huge majority. You can pretty much do whatever you like.
Yeah.
The whole argument for Labour was they weren't the Tories. It wouldn't be chaos and scandal and controversy anymore. They would be competent. They would basically just focus on policy and getting things done. And it's turned out that actually being in government is much more difficult than they thought it would be. It's almost as if winning the election came as a massive shock to them. They weren't expecting to be in government, and when they got handed the keys to number 10, they didn't really know what to do. But they'd been in front for months and months and months. Everyone knew they were going to win the election, but it didn't seem as though they had a plan.
Yeah, but even if you accept all of that, and I do actually, because I think they weren't prepared for it, even though they said they were, even though they said they had a plan, they said they were ready for government, and we can find all the clips that you want, if you want, to show you that that's what Keir Starmer said. Everything was costed, fully costed, they weren't going to spend any money that they didn't account for, all of that. You know, even accepting that they got that bit wrong, surely after 6 months of being in, they would show some signs of improvement, but they're not getting any better. I mean, that's the problem. They're sort of getting worse. And it looks like now, for example, my Lord Hermer, or Lord Harmer, as I like to call him, is probably going to be the next victim. He's going to probably lose his job as Attorney General, quite rightly in my view, at a government reshuffle which might be happening in the next month or so.
Yeah, the problem they've got as well is that they just seem accident prone. You know, you become... you get a reputation that you just can't do anything right. Now, that's been obviously backed up by the evidence. You know, they just can't seem to, as I say, get back on the front foot. They're constantly on the defensive, trying to defend things that they've done and explain mistakes that they've made. And yeah, there is now talk of a reshuffle. I'm still not convinced that that will happen. One of the other things that Keir Starmer said before is he wants to keep ministers in place rather than constantly chopping and changing like the Conservatives do. But when your back's against the wall as a Prime Minister, there's always that lever that it's tempting to pull, reshuffle, you know, get new people in, get rid of people that aren't performing well, get new people in. It doesn't always work out, though. Sometimes that just causes even more problems going forward.
Right. And Rachel Reeves back in the firing line again. I mean, I thought the story had gone away. I ran into somebody yesterday. The story didn't really break before I left this show yesterday, but it kind of developed late morning and into the afternoon. More questions about her history, more questions about whether she told the truth about what she'd done before, more questions now about an expenses scandal that took place up at HBOS. And this is a bona fide, you know, this is not, you know, some kind of what you might dismiss as a dodgy, you know, right-wing outfit that's just trying to cause trouble. This is the BBC who've gone into some detail, and they've also said that they've seen papers, they've seen, you know, documents, which they haven't yet released, which put her in a very difficult place.
Well, it's a strange one, isn't it? I read it very carefully yesterday, and
me too.
As far as I could tell, there was a complaint and there was an investigation, but it never reached a conclusion.
Right.
And then she left. Now, we're told she left on good terms. She claims that she didn't know anything about any investigation or complaint about her expenses. So it's all a little bit strange. So, you know, if the BBC have more evidence to come out, then that will obviously worry Number 11, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
I thought yesterday was just a perfect example. She got some reasonably good news in the morning. You know, we avoided
Yeah, it wasn't
recession.
really, though, was it? I mean, somebody said to me, the fact that 0.1% of growth is good news tells you how bad things are.
Well, exactly. I mean, it is all relative. But, you know, it could have been worse. And then by lunchtime, she's embroiled in a completely different controversy. So I think that to me was like this government in microcosm. You get a tiny little bit of relatively good news, followed by lots and lots of bad news.
That's right. And I mean, you know, according to, depending on who you speak to, there are others who will confirm that she was let go as a result of this scandal. It may well be, it's not entirely without possibility that the sort of the definition of an investigation is going to be changed. You know, the wording's going to be changed. You know, Starmer seems to specialise in sort of, you know, expanding frameworks around things which make it look as if they're legal when in fact they really weren't. And people have said to me in the past anyway, aside from that, you know, the whole business of her CV and her misrepresentation on that, which in other places would be considered to be a fraudulent thing. I mean, I spoke to my accountant yesterday. I said, what would you do with somebody who applied for a job, got the job based on a claim in their CV they worked in the banking room for 10 years and it turned out they hadn't? He said, we'd fire them. We just let them go. You know, and so we've got a woman who's stewarding the economy, who's been accused of and found guilty of faking her CV, you know, exaggerating it, embellishing it, which is a sacking offence in most companies, and to now be at the centre of an expenses scandal, which I think there is more to come out about.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, it's very embarrassing. You know, if you are in charge of the nation's finances and you are in some way embroiled in a controversy over expenses you claimed in a previous job, it's obviously embarrassing. Now, I think where the economy going gangbusters and where she's bringing down taxes and making lots of popular decisions and things were going really well, this would probably not hit home as much as it has. But the fact that she's already under an awful lot of pressure because of the job that she's doing right now, I think that's why this has been as big a story as it has been. And as I say, it'll be very interesting to see if the BBC have more evidence of this either today or...
I've got a sense they've got something else to come out. They're sort of waiting to see what denial they get up front, you know. So maybe that will come later on. But listen, good to talk to you. Kevin Schofield, political editor at HuffPost UK. Happy to bring him back to his childhood there with the clip from the Cabinet, a.k.a. Zippy, from some years ago. This from Paul in Fife. Mike, once upon a time there were certain professions which automatically commanded our respect and admiration. Doctors, police, lawyers, judges, teachers, even politicians. No longer. These were institutions which, with minor exceptions, had served us with dignity and dedication. No longer. So many examples in recent years have eroded our respect and our admiration. We now look on these professions with distrust and cynicism. The fabric of this country is being torn to shreds. I think that's a very good point. And I think particularly politicians, you know, we're going to speak to a teacher coming up who I think you will all agree is one of the great examples of what is a success. And that is, of course, Catherine Birbalsingh, CBE, founder and head teacher of the Michaela Community School. She is an absolutely brilliant example of anyone in this country who has proved herself to be a success and who has proved herself to be absolutely and utterly without stain. You would not wish to put anything towards Catherine Birbalsingh unless she were ready for a very robust answer. And of course she's been having a bit of a feud with Bridget Phillipson, who is the Secretary of State for Education, who has been, shall we say, slightly disingenuous in dealing with her. Let's get a couple of voice notes first. Claire, on the farmers.
Morning, Mike. Claire from the Wirral here. I disagree with your analysis of Starmer and his regime not understanding our farming community. They've given our British farmers money to farmers abroad, so they must appreciate the need for farming abroad. Unfortunately, they want to dismantle our working communities and make us more needy and reliant on European imports, plus a land grab for Starmer grad and solar and wind farms.
No, listen, I take your point, but the fact is they don't understand farming because the money they're giving to farming abroad is not for farming. It's about composing some ridiculous idea of making sure that net zero targets are achieved. So it's not actually anything to do with farming, it's more to do with net zero. That's what they're all about. Let's get Steve on Labour's lies.
Hi, Mike. Steve from Stamford here. Great show as always. Was it Lloyd George that said there are three types of lies? Lies, damn lies, and the Labour Party.
Yes, very well, shall we say, edited down. Lies, damn lies and statistics, but it works just as well that way. What about Zippy? Here's Ian. No, we haven't got Ian, never mind. Let's give you a chance to win some money instead. It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Tony Blair claimed his government was all about education, education, education. Sir Keir Starmer's government is all about disinformation, 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 says Dennis in Manchester. I think you're right. We'll take that up with Catherine Birbalsingh, who's coming to us right next, right here on Talk.
It's Russia that's killing people. If Russia stopped fighting, if Russia wanted to end the war, if Russia stopped fighting, Russia could just stop fighting. There wouldn't be a war. No one would be killed.
And that would be
great.
great.
Our job done.
Yeah,
why doesn't the West say that to Russia?
Ultimately, maybe that's what the negotiations are.
Which part of Britain would you give away if we were invaded and you wanted to negotiate
None at all.
peace?
None at all.
Oh, so we wouldn't give away any of Britain.
But
it's okay to give away a bit of Ukraine.
Hang on, it's not us giving it away, Julia. Right? It's Ukraine, and Ukraine
doesn't want to give it away.
Of course it doesn't.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. We're going to speak to Catherine Birbalsingh very shortly, CBE founder and head, of course, and teacher at Michaela Community School. First of all, though, I've got to show you something from the Daily Star, because when you're on the front page of the Daily Star being ridiculed, I think you know the game is up. And on the front page this morning, it is Rachel Reeves, Chancellor's Pinocchio CV in full. Picture of her with a massive, great Pinocchio-style nose. From 1952 to 2022, I was the Queen of England. In 1966, I scored a hat-trick to help England win the World Cup. In 1969, I was the first man to walk on the moon. And in 1989, I invented the World Wide Web. Now, I'm learning my 4 times and 7 times tables. I mean, it really is bad news for the Chancellor. It's bad news for the government, bad news for Labour all round. And Catherine Birbalsingh has been in a bit of a tussle with another cabinet member, who is, of course, the Secretary of State for Education, Bridget Phillipson. Catherine, a very good morning to you.
Morning.
We spoke, I think it was last week, didn't we, about this meeting that you had with her, and you were quite robustly challenging her and telling her the things that you thought she should know. And you quite rightly said at one point, when she said that, you know, she wants to do this with schooling and you disagreed, and you said, what does she know? She's not a teacher. She hasn't done what I've done. And then you got, once again, monstered by everybody who said, well, you've been very disrespectful to a cabinet member. Well, I'm completely in agreement with you, Catherine, and I think you're absolutely right. Tell us what the latest instalment is.
Well, there isn't so much a latest instalment. I mean, what's key is that it's true that I wasn't very deferential. It's not true that the business of lowering your tone. What she said was, right at the beginning, I want to cool things down. And I think what she meant by that was, you're constantly asking me questions. I've invited you here to talk about nice things about your school and for you to be a typical teacher and just be nice. Right. And I wasn't being nice. I was trying to hold her to account. And I kept asking questions. And I was being difficult, you know. And I recognize that that's not normal. They're used to people showing them lots of deference and sort of bowing to the power, you know.
Yeah, but surely these are the same people, are they not, who love to sort of champion difficult women. You know, difficult women through the ages have helped the Labour government and the Labour Party become what they are. You know, what's her face? Yeah. Bridget Phillipson got the job probably because she's the difficult woman.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look. It wasn't just me, it was my deputy and I, and we were having a conversation with her. And most of the time I was asking her questions. Yeah. That's what I was doing. And that was because I wanted to hold her to account, and I wanted to know whether or not she would be able to answer my questions. And what I discovered was that when she did answer my questions, she gave me platitudes. She did not give me real answers. She was unable to name a single school of the top nearly 100 schools that have had more than +1 on their progress. She hasn't been to visit a single one. In fact, it was fascinating, the response, the official government response to our meeting after I'd spoken about it was to say, she doesn't need any lectures from anyone because she's lived it, i.e. she's been to school. She doesn't need me telling her what a school requires. And my point isn't that you have to be a teacher to be education secretary. Right. My point is that if you don't know much about education, you should be listening to school leaders. And she's saying, I don't need to listen to school leaders.
Right.
I've been to school. I know best. And that was certainly what my experience was in the actual meeting.
Right. Well, we know who she's listening to. She's listening to the teaching unions, isn't she? I mean, she is basically in cahoots and probably enraptured by the teaching unions, who we all know have got their own particular agenda, which is not necessarily about promoting equality in school. It's all about promoting their agenda.
Yeah, possibly. I did ask her if she wanted to be the leader of the Labour Party, partly because I'm trying to figure out why is she doing this? Because anyone who understands schools and who understands how we've risen in the international league tables thanks to the freedoms that academies have would never want to take away those freedoms. So I asked her if she wanted to be leader of the Labour Party to see, well, is that why you're doing this? Is it because of the unions? I don't know, to be honest. I have no idea why she's doing this. Part of the meeting, I wanted to find out, well, why?
Yeah.
You know, people say, for instance, oh, why are you calling her a Marxist? I'm not meaning to insult her. I'm actually saying it's because she genuinely believes that what she's doing is the right thing. And that's why I say, well, she must be a Marxist then.
Well, this is the problem.
Yeah. Well, either she's a Marxist or she's doing this for personal gain and to gain power and to become the leader of the Labour Party. It's one or the other, because it's obvious that it's the wrong thing to do. Academies need their freedoms to be able to give a bespoke and tailored approach to their children. When I asked her what's the problem here, what is she trying to fix? I'll tell you what the problems are in education. We have a recruitment problem. Well, she's actually closing down the number of recruitment opportunities that we have as head teachers. We have a problem with SEND, special needs kids, and the provision around that. Well, she's not looking at any of that. We have a problem with behavior in our classrooms. Well, the changes she's making will actually make behavior worse. But the thing is that these are complex things. It's hard to understand why behavior would be affected by uniform, and she's changing uniform policy. Right. It's hard to understand that. It would take me a long time to explain it. But school leaders do understand these sorts of things, and that's why she should be listening to us. But she's not, because she's not a school leader, and she doesn't understand this stuff herself, because she's never actually experienced it, which is why it's so important she should be listening to us. But their official position is she does not need any lectures, because she's already lived it and she's already been to school.
And she's also driven very much, as you were saying, and I was saying earlier, by a particular agenda. There was a great picture that was posted on Twitter this week during Prime Minister's questions, and it's a picture of Bridget Phillipson giving what is described in the capture as a death stare to Labour MP Julie Minns, who basically got up at Prime Minister's questions and said the government needs to be criticised over the special education needs school because they're all bursting at the seams thanks to the huge VAT bill on private schools, because, you know, that happens to be a fact. But, of course, judging by the response and the look that Bridget Phillipson gives her, she's not somebody who wants to brook any kind of, breaking of the line, the sort of the cabinet line being what she says goes. She doesn't want to have to take any advice from either you or even from any of her fellow MPs.
Yes, well, yes, possibly. I mean, Siobhan McDonough got up in the Commons and argued against these bits of the bill where you remove academy freedoms, explaining, and she's a Labour MP, explaining how this was a disaster for the local school in her area, when in the day they tried to make it into a Harris Academy in order to improve it. And because the freedoms weren't there, they had a very hard time. It isn't the case that it's only, there are people in the Labour Party who recognise that these parts of the bill are extremely destructive to schools and will harm poorer and more disadvantaged children. And that's where, when I call Bridget a Marxist, I'm saying she thinks she's doing what's right for poor children, as Marxists do, and they don't realise that the things that they're doing will actually harm poor children.
Right. And when do you think she will realise that? Possibly when it's too late. I mean, we've got a government which is run by people who don't appear to know what they're doing. You know, we've got Rachel Reeves, who's now being questioned about an expenses scandal, who faked her own CV. You know, we've got people who run, the Environment and Rural Affairs Department who've never left London. You know, the list goes sort of goes on and on and on. So, you know, you wouldn't be that surprised, would you, to find the woman running the the Department of State for Education doesn't really understand much about it.
Yeah, well, and I understand that. I just wish she would speak to school leaders, and I wish she wouldn't take the position that she doesn't really need to hear from us. And she was unable to give me decent answers to my questions in that meeting. What's important is the content of the bill and the fact that this bill is going through Parliament right now, and she will ruin schools, the good schools that she has never visited, the school leaders she has never spoken to, and who she is not listening to because she says she knows better than we do.
I know. It's a shocking situation, shocking state of affairs. Well, keep it up, Catherine. Hopefully you'll win in the end, but I'm not too sure about this government. We may have to wait until they get kicked out. Catherine Birble-Singh, CBE, thank you very much indeed. Have a good day. Head teacher, of course, at Mykellar Community School, the most successful school state-wise in this country. She gets better results sometimes, and even at least equal results with Eton private school, which costs 50 grand a year. But don't worry, Bridget Phillipson knows better than her how to run everything. Let's get another gaffe, shall we? Time for Kevin O'Sullivan.
I'm joined by columnist at the... By the way, it'll take about 10 years to get all his jobs out now. Columnist at The Sun, The Sunday Times and The Spectator, and now a host presenter on Times Radio from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. every Saturday. Welcome, Rod.
Kevin, good to hear you, mate.
OK, before we start, can I see Rod? He doesn't seem to be there. Is he there? I can hear him. Oh, there he is, there he is.
It's Rod Liddell's head. I mean, normally he's quite low down, you know. We used to get him on the show quite a bit. In Kevin's case, he's now completely just got his head on the desk. He may have had a couple of drinks, I don't know. It was not for me to say. But a very, very, very entertaining columnist. And he's in The Sun, he's in The Sunday Times, as we say, in The Spectator, and also on Times Radio as well. Coming up, we're going to speak to Asher Fredman, Director for Israel at the Abraham Accords Peace Institute. We'll find out from him what he's expecting is going to happen coming up this weekend. There's been all kinds of deadlines put down. There's been all kinds of warnings issued. There's been all kinds of promises made. But what will actually happen on Saturday? Will we get some more hostages out? Will we actually have a peaceful transition to some kind of future for Gaza and Israel? Hard to say. Morning, Mike. I disagree with your analysis of Starmer and his regime, says Claire, not understanding our farming community. They have given our British farmers money to farmers abroad, so they must appreciate the need for farming abroad. Unfortunately, they want to dismantle our working communities and make us more needy and reliant on European imports, plus a land grab for Starmer grad and solar and wind farms. Well, we're still talking about that solar and wind farms thing. You know, people are being forcibly asked to accept heat pumps and solar panels in their homes, and even sometimes double glazing that they haven't asked for, all paid for by you and I, the taxpayer. Absolutely and utterly unbelievable. 8:35, this is Morning Glory.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:37. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. And then I think Alex Phillips is here, is she? Is she in at 10? She is. I'm getting a lot of nodding heads there. Great show, as always, says Carl in Shrewsbury. I've said it before and still maintain that Reeves and Rayner have something on Starmer. It's the only explanation as to why they're still there. Well, it does beg his belief, doesn't it? They're all just about as bad as each other, aren't they? Let's talk about The Sun this morning, though, because they've got an interesting story on the front page, which we haven't mentioned. Race Mare Apprentice star quits. That's a favourite to win the BBC's Apprentice show has quit after he was accused of using racist language. Dr. Janet Denzel, who's a cosmetic dentist, understood to have used a highly offensive term, coloured, to describe a black person during a task, and he's basically fallen on his sword and said he's going to chuck it all in and leave. Also, if you haven't seen it today, The Sun on page 12 carries Julie Hartley-Brewer's column. Julie Hartley-Brewer, of course, here every single weekday from Monday to Thursday from 10 till 1. Alex Phillips in on Fridays. She's talking about the Ukraine situation with Donald Trump, and also Economical with the Truth, the Rachel Reeves story we've been talking about. Oh dear, Rachel from Accounts has been caught out for telling yet another porky pie on her CV. Absolutely right. It is ridiculous, isn't it? Absolutely extraordinary. Let's talk to Asher Fredman, though, Director for Israel at the Abraham Accords Peace Institute. Asher, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. Big weekend coming up. I mean, I say that with some trepidation. I'm hearing from various different people, I don't know whether this is what you're hearing, that the promised sort of Armageddon, if you like, from Donald Trump and also from Benjamin Netanyahu might not occur because it would appear, hopefully, that Hamas has agreed to release some hostages.
Yes, Mike, I think that's right. I think that this Saturday, once again, we'll see 3 hostages released. We're hearing more and more stories about the torture and the horrible conditions which Hamas, the terrorist group, is subjecting the other hostages to, the ones that remain, which is the background for President Trump's correct demand that they all be released. But I think that at this point, we'll see Hamas continue with the plan, the outline that was agreed upon. But what I think we're going to see in the coming weeks is Hamas upping its demands, demanding not just the release of terrorist murderers for the hostages, but demanding new equipment for its terror tunnels, demanding the right to be able to come up to the perimeter fence, demanding everything that it needs to resume its terror attacks. And then Israel will be faced with a difficult choice. Do we continue with this deal, or do we go back to military operations?
Yeah, I mean, one of the more distasteful aspects of all of this, and it's all pretty distasteful, and sometimes that's not really a strong enough word for some of the treatment that has been meted out by Hamas to these poor hostages that they took, innocent people, hiding them under, terrible conditions and starving them and making them sit in the dark, and in some cases sexually assaulting them, is the way that they've kind of released them. This ridiculous parade of propaganda where they get the Red Cross involved. Last time we saw those 3 terribly badly treated men coming out, one of them being forced to say that he was looking forward to seeing his wife and his children, even as Hamas knew that they'd already been killed on October the 7th. The surrounding men from Hamas, but also just men from Gaza, intimidating the women, all wearing these, black face coverings and green bandanas. I mean, do you think that this time, do you think Hamas might have learned that that's really not a great look, and maybe actually this time they won't do that?
I think Hamas is looking to reassert its control over Gaza, to show Gazans, show the world that it's in control.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing not just these men intimidating, but these sort of bloodthirsty mobs screaming and yelling at these poor young women, these poor older men or emaciated men, and even children. We're seeing how Hamas is dressing up young children in terror uniforms and giving them guns and taking pictures and really, unfortunately, sadly, tragically, training the next generation of Gazans in terror and hatred, which will continue, unfortunately, as long as Hamas controls the Gaza Strip. And as you pointed out, the international community of the Red Cross, which did nothing for the hostages, didn't deliver one parcel of food, one piece of medicine to them the entire time. And essentially what they're doing is taking part in these grotesque ceremonies and then serving as a taxi service to drive them out of the Gaza Strip.
Right. And so you're not confident that that's going to be any different this weekend then?
Israel has made demands, and hopefully President Trump's threats will be helpful. But I think there's a good chance we'll still see some sort of grotesque terror ceremony, because internally we see it and we say that's horrible, that's Nazi-like. But unfortunately, in the Palestinian arena, for some people, it creates the impression of, wow, what great heroes, what great fighters. And unfortunately, they're doing it a lot for internal consumption as well.
No, I dare say. And what reaction do you think has come from in recent days? I mean, I know the initial reaction wasn't obviously very welcoming from the countries around Gaza, but the King of Jordan was in Washington, had a meeting with Donald Trump. He appeared to be not completely, against the idea that Donald Trump had of kind of, moving some of the people from Gaza, because it's simply not a place you could live in anymore until it gets rebuilt, perhaps by him and perhaps as some kind of, resort.
I think the most important statement actually was just this week, the Emirati ambassador to Washington, who said something like, we haven't seen, other than President Trump's plan, we haven't seen any other realistic alternatives. President Trump's plan is difficult. We haven't seen any other good alternatives. At the end of the day, today, given that Hamas controls Gaza, reconstructing Gaza is reconstructing Hamas, and you can't reconstruct it as long as Hamas is in power. So President Trump's plan is out of the box. It's definitely a new paradigm, but the idea of people, it's important to point out, nobody's talking about forcibly displacing Gazans. It's talking about giving Gazans who voluntarily want to leave an alternative. You can do that. You can then defeat Hamas, and then you can build a better future in that territory for the Palestinians and for everyone involved.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense, to be honest, from my point of view. But, what do I know? Asha, good to talk to you, and let's hope that things improve over the weekend and you get some more of your hostages back and they're all in good condition and they're well, and the rest of them will get let out soon as well. It's absolutely disgusting what's been going on there. Asha Fredman there, Director for Israel at the Abraham Accords Peace Institute. It's 8:44. Rachel Reeves is a liability to the Labour Party, has no credibility as a Chancellor or indeed as a human being, says Alan in Merseyside. Tony says, I've played the game Monopoly for decades. Can I put being an entrepreneur and economist on my CV? Well, only if you fancy running for power in the Labour Party. And Margaret says, Rachel from Accounts is on the final countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1... Yay! And then she was gone. If only. Let's get a voice note from Ian.
Morning, Mike. Oh, Keir Starmer. The farmer's playing Baby Shark when he was at that at that conference. Funniest thing I have ever seen. He just didn't know what to do, did he? He actually sounded like Zippy. I can do that. With Robot Rachel. Mate, you could not write it. What can I say? Fantastic show. Great way to start the day. Keep up the good work, mate.
Ian, thank you. Maybe we should give it another outing. Should we play the Starmer clip? Starmer going out to explain how Starmergrad is going to look.
That's very good. Come on, Bungle, put that.
It must be really incredible to be part of building, I mean, actually here, not just building houses, but building a community.
Just talk to us! Talk to us! Just talk to us!
Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, he goes out, doesn't realise there's a tractor protest about to happen, comes out of the car, starts talking about Starmergrad, gets back in the car when they start playing the Crazy Frog, Crazy Shark, whatever it is. Let's go back to London, fixing the foundations. What a complete plank that man is. Speaking of which, Plank of the Week, of course, a Valentine's Day special coming out later on tonight. We'll have a clip from that for you in the next hour. Coming up next, though, Martin Bell, OBE. Goodness gracious me, do we not need that man here? Former independent MP, anti-sleaze campaigner. He was elected as an MP, of course, because of Neil and Christine Hamilton's sleaze, which appears to be nothing compared to what we've got now in the actual government. This is Talk.
in Birmingham. I've lived in Birmingham pretty much my whole life, and when you're paying more and getting less, it's not exactly the ideal time to be putting up all the councillors' allowances. Although it might surprise you, but I do actually sympathise with John Cotton's point about getting more people to be able to afford to be councillors, because long term, I mean, no one's going to vote for having higher pay for any politician, but longer term, it could be that we just end up with a bunch of students and a bunch of retired people as the only people who become councillors. But I don't think it's the right move to be sticking up your allowances at this time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 10 minutes to 9. I'm here, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. Alex Phillips is here after that. Morning, says Jules. The fact that Bridget Phillipson did not ask Catherine Birbal seeing how she manages to get such good results is just proof in my mind that Labour are not interested in working for this country. Keep us lowly creatures down. Either that or they're afraid that people will be smarter than them. A very low bar. Absolutely right, Jules in Bristol. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, there is a problem, isn't there, with this government? They don't seem to want to listen to anybody who is what you might call an expert in any particular field of endeavour. And also, they do seem to be rather fond of the odd freebie, and certainly in Rachel Reeves' case, being a bit economical with the truth. Let's talk to Martin Bell, OBE, former independent MP, anti-sleaze campaigner, former BBC journalist, of course, as well. Martin, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's rather disturbing, isn't it, and sort of slightly worrying that here we have, you know, the next generation of MPs, I suppose you might say. You've moved on from Neil and Christine Hamilton that you challenged very successfully back in the day. But, you know, as soon as Labour got in, they were revealed to have been in receipt of all sorts of freebies from Lord Alley, you know, suits and glasses and holidays and flats and all the rest of it. And here we now seem to have a Chancellor of the Exchequer who has been economical with the truth about her CV, which is, I suppose, me being rather generous to her. And now it turns out she might have been caught up in some kind of expenses scandal. Have we lost the ability to find people who stand for office who have got any kind of standards at all?
Well, now is the moment to decide. It's more than slightly worrying, it's very worrying. Going to go into public life, stand for Parliament, you will be exposed to scrutiny. You're looking for 60,000 or so people to vote for you. So you put your CV in the public domain. And if you haven't served in the army, you don't claim you have. You haven't got medals, you don't say you have. You don't fiddle your, whatever your degree might be.
Right.
You don't say you've worked for the best part of a decade in the Bank of England when you worked for 5 years and 7 months. I don't think the HBOS thing is such a long time ago. But I think concentrate on the shall we say, improved CV.
Yeah.
Why do they do it? Why do they keep inflicting these injuries on themselves? That's what I don't understand.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think, you know, we've all worked in various different places. You know, you were a journalist for a very long time, and, you know, there are some journalists, I'm sure, that you were aware of that may not have been entirely honest with their expenses, but they weren't running for office. And at the end of the day, I don't understand anybody who does such a high-profile job and who seeks high office who would even consider sort of, you know, meddling with their CV and creating a false image, because you know you're going to get found out, surely.
Mike, I've thought long and hard about this, and the conclusion I've come to is that a lot of people who want to be members of Parliament, the chief qualification is their ambition.
Yeah.
And when they're there, they have this sense of entitlement. The rules don't apply to them. I sat for 3.5 years on the Standards and Privileges Committee. All sorts of eminent MPs came before us, like Mandelson and Keith Vaz.
Yeah.
And it was all the same, as if the rules didn't apply to them.
Right.
But I think it's the time to stand up and say, yes, they do, here and now.
Right. Yeah, they don't like it, do they? They do. They get sort of filled with the I don't know, the intoxication of power or something like that. I mean, I was just looking, and I understand that a lot of these expenses are for staffing and for costs of an office. But in the last 3 years before she became a government minister, she claimed, I'm talking about Rachel Reeves, something approaching £750,000 over 3 years. It's an awful lot of money. And you just think to yourself, how much of that now should we be looking at?
I think it's time to look again at everything. I found that when I was an MP, obviously because I got elected on the issue of public trust in public life, I'd be above reproach myself. So you look at your records. When journalists came asking, I said, well, here are my bank statements. Look at them, find out what you like. But obviously, it's a matter of common sense. And I'm not saying I'm for or against this government, but it seems to have had a common sense bypass.
Yes, it really does. And common sense is basically our watchword here at Talk. I mean, we like to think of ourselves as the home of common sense. But yeah, I mean, I just wonder about the kind of the state of mind of somebody, regardless of how power crazed they might be, who wants to actually fake their CV. I mean, I would never dream of doing anything like that. My CV isn't particularly elaborate. It's not particularly impressive. But I wouldn't imagine that I would upgrade it by just making something up. I just wouldn't do it.
Now, I'm put in mind of the Chief Constable recently who wore a Falklands medal on Sunday. I mean, he was 16 at the time.
Right.
It would be found out. I mean, you don't do it because it's wrong, but you also don't do it because you're going to be found out.
Well, quite. And also, in his case, he was relieved of his command, was he not? Because it was taken so seriously. And in any other walk of life, I was having lunch with my accountant yesterday. I said, if somebody had come to you and started working for you, who faked something on their CV about working for the Bank of England longer than they actually did, what would you do? And he said, we'd fire them straight away.
Yes, I'd say goodbye. Yeah. I think this is a defining moment for Keir Starmer. I mean, he has to deal with this. Can't just say, it's a long time ago and I have faith in him.
Right.
Because it looks bad and it besmirches all the people around him. Now is the time for some decisive action, I would think.
But it also suggests a bit of a character flaw, doesn't it?
Possibly. Why she did that, I can't imagine. She needs to give a better explanation. Yeah. We've had so far.
Definitely so. Martin, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Martin Bell, former independent MP and anti-sleaze campaigner. Mike, says Richard, why pay for a private jet costing £1 million? I thought we had an RAF. Trump uses his military to take migrants home. Why can't we? This is a story about the migrant jet that took some Albanians, I think, home, and it wasn't even full, but it cost £1 million. EasyJet would have done it for a tenth of that cost, I bet. Some ministers are getting brown envelopes. Possibly. Here's another correction. The Chancellor's online CV gives incorrect dates for her time at HBOS as well, which her team also acknowledged. It states that she left in December 2009, 5 months before she was elected to Parliament in May 2010. In fact, we have established her employment at HBOS finished in mid-May 2009 when she signed a compromise agreement. Yeah, I mean, there was a piece on the BBC that I watched last night which showed Rachel Reeves actually in a new job and a picture of her in a new job after she claimed that she was already still in the old job. It's all very weird. I don't understand also what's the mentality of somebody? I mean, if you had a girlfriend or a boyfriend who just told lies all the time, you'd kick him out, wouldn't you? You'd go, sorry, that's enough. Where have you been tonight? Oh, I was down at the old Dog and Duck. Were you? Oh, well, here's a picture of you walking out of a station 15 miles away. Blimey, that's not right, is it? Let's get another gaffe. Now, this is one of mine, apparently. Now, I'm going to dispute this because I think I've been stitched up here. But this is Damien, one of our very, very efficient members of the production team, assistant producer of this show. He came in and headbutted the camera. And after that, I think he's covered it up for himself. And he's kind of... I don't know what he's done, but have a look at this. Welcome to Morning Glory and welcome to Talk, the home of common sense. We are, of course, here every single weekday morning from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm trying to remember 10 a.m. Some people would like us to be here from 6 till 10 p.m. But there we are. Theo Usherwood is here with us. Very, very good morning to you, Theo. Thank you very much indeed. That was Liam, who appears to have tried to give a header to one of the cameras before he walked out of the room. Listen, it's one of those mornings. Sometimes things don't go as well as you would expect them to. Now, it's entirely possible that I said Liam. I just wonder if they've dubbed that in. I know his name's Damien. I see him every day. Of course I know his name. Why would I call him Liam? It makes no sense to me. That's why I think this is a fake gaffe, just to make up the numbers, you know. But anyway, as you can see, I was slightly discombobulated early on in the conversation anyway, and I was talking absolute rubbish. Didn't even know what time it was. It must have been very early in the show. So I apologise to Damien for calling him Liam, and I'm very sorry, I won't do it again. Liam. Liam's a nicer name than Damien, to be fair. Maybe we'll just start calling him Liam, I don't know. Anyway, this from Ian in Warrington. HBOS, Halifax. I have it on good authority that Ms Reeves was in charge of sharpening pencils at the local sperm bank. Also, her retention in the cabinet is because she has pics of senior members doing things to farm animals. I think you've let your imagination run away with you there a bit, Ian. Coming up in the next hour, Ben Habib is here. We'll tell you what's coming up on Plank of the Week, a special Valentine's Day edition. Also, we'll speak to Emma Webber as well from that Nottingham situation.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in. An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has approved for the use by...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 9 minutes. I'm Mike Graham. It is Friday. It is the 14th of February. That means only one thing. It's Valentine's Day, which is great for some people, not so great for other people, and very complicated for some other people. I'm not going to say who I would be referring to there, but you get my drift. Coming up in this show, we're going to be talking to, of course, Ben Habib in this final hour. We're going to be looking at Rachel Reeves once again in the spotlight because she cannot seem to lie straight in bed. As I said, you know, she's on the front pages this morning. Even the Daily Star has got her on the front page, and they call her Chancellor Pinocchio. Her CV in full. From 1952 to 2022, I was the Queen of England. In 1966, I scored a hat-trick to help England win the World Cup. In 1969, I was the first man to walk on the moon, and in 1989, I invented the World Wide Web. The problem, of course, for Rachel Reeves is that basically she's under more pressure to come clean over an expenses scandal that happened quite a long time ago when she worked at HBOS. She's already told lies about what she did at HBOS. It turns out she wasn't an economist there. And as somebody pointed out, if you're an economist at the Bank of England, why do you then take a job working effectively in a retail bank, in a retail operation, handling complaints, regardless of whether or not you have an expense account, which you apparently had? Why on earth would you do that if you were such a high-flying economist at the Bank of England in the first place? But according to the Daily Mail this morning, she was accused of inappropriate spending, lavish dinners, taxis, gifts, including gifts for her boss, who apparently signed off on her expenses as well. A £152 handbag is supposed to have been bought. She's also been accused of buying perfume for people. She presumably must have bought some of it for herself. But she clearly is a woman who is incapable of telling the truth. This is the same woman who told us that she worked at the Bank of England for 10 years when it turned out it was only for 5 and a bit. Now, let's hear from Keir Starmer way back at the beginning when he said that Rachel Reeves was going to be the greatest Chancellor ever because she was a woman.
When Rachel Reeves stands up, she will be making history. And I can tell you, young women and girls across the country will be watching, they will look up, and they will notice.
Yeah, they will notice, and they'll say, what on earth did you appoint her for? She doesn't seem to know what she's doing. She's taken the economy down the gurgler. We've got low growth, lower than we could ever have imagined. And coming up in April, the economy is going to tank even further because she's put national insurance up so that many, many companies will simply either go out of business or just fire a load of people. She is a complete and utter disaster. I've got no idea how she got the job. I've got no idea how she's still in the job. Keir Starmer, of course, isn't any better. He tells lies for a living as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can send us a voice note. You can talk to us about a great many things. We'll also speak to Emma Webber coming up, who's Barnaby Webber's mother. Barnaby, of course, one of the victims of that terrible day in Nottingham when that awful man, Valdo Calocane, who was a schizophrenic who should never have been let out into the public streets, murdered both Barnaby and his good friend, a fellow student, and another man just because he felt like it. It was absolutely incredible, absolutely ghastly. We'll find out what is going on with that Nottingham inquiry, which Keir Starmer has ordered as well. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about the NHS. They've spent all the $23 billion that they were given in the early part of last summer. Guess what? On pay rises, for heaven's sake. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory, 6 minutes past 9. Let's get it on. Should we have another clip about Rachel Reeves? Why not? Why don't we hear from Beth Rigby, who was grilling her about the economy and what she was doing with it?
In the manifesto, you criticised the Conservatives for taking the tax burden to a 70-year high. What is it now at the end of this Parliament after your budget? What will it be?
I'm being really straight with people. The tax burden overall goes up. But
What's
we've
it go
made
up
decisions.
to, from where?
It's the highest burden
ever
of tax I recognise.
She's not very good, is she? Let's talk to Ben Habib. Ben, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I mean, surely we deserve better, don't we? I mean, this government is so useless, and I get tired. I don't really get tired of saying it, but I can't believe quite how bad they are. And now Rachel Reeves, once again, finds herself in the eye of the storm, accused of an expenses scandal, accused of, dodging up her CV, exaggerating things that she did, pretending that she did things that she didn't do. And more shockingly, I looked up her expenses, right, over the past 3 years before she came into government. And believe it or not, it adds up to about £750,000.
Wow, that is huge.
Right. Now, she's charged... Now, I know a lot of that they'll say is, oh, that's office expenses, it's staffing and all that. But the office expenses themselves are something like $200,000 a year.
Yeah, I mean, what immediately strikes me about that, apart from the shockingly large figure, is that if part of that was for herself... is also in trouble with HMRC because she should have been paying tax if that was effectively a benefit to her that she was receiving. Actually, she's guilty you know, without wishing to be sued by her any second now, she's guilty of tax evasion. Well, if she's received sums of money which have effectively gone into her back pocket one way or another, she could be on the end of a writ from HMRC.
Well, exactly right. I mean, if, for example, any of us had incurred expenses which we falsely filed, for example, and had them signed off, you know, I've looked up the definition of fraud and misrepresentation, and the law takes these things very seriously. You know, faking your CV can result in you losing your job. Faking your expenses can result in you going to prison.
Yeah, I mean, that story about HBOS, you know, and her expending stuff and being forced to leave the company on the back of it, that I think is damning for her. I think actually that's the end of Rachel Reeves. There's too much noise around her, and that is the trigger that Starmer is now going to have to use to fire her. He can't have a Chancellor of the Exchequer who herself was dismissed for, you know, effectively malfeasance. You know, it's just unacceptable.
Well, exactly right. And this is the problem, isn't it? There's too much noise around an awful lot of people in this government. I would say the same is true of Lord Hermer, you know, a guy who was appointed by Keir Starmer, who was plucked from obscurity, if you like, from Matrix Chambers, a massively left-wing, you know, human rights law firm, who has had all sorts of run-ins with various people who you would not want to meet on a dark night, including Jerry Adams, Shamima Begum, some dodgy asylum seekers from the Chagos Islands, and also he's been involved in telling the Caribbean how to get reparations. I mean, this man hasn't got a good word to say about Britain, and he's basically been appointed to the government. He's been made a Lord, so he sits in the House of Lords, and he's an absolute disgrace, this man.
He is. I mean, he holds a very serious position in government. He's the Attorney General, which I appreciate as a political appointment, but it gives him great sway over the judicial system in the United Kingdom, something that effectively Tony Blair enabled by taking the law lords out of the Lords and rearranging our whole judicial system, creating the ability for this malign individual, who I think, you know, it's a high bar to be one of the worst politicians in Parliament, but I think he's pretty close to it. And, you know, you talked about Jerry Adams. This is a man who was trying to reverse provisions in the Legacy Act that was passed by the Conservatives last year, drawing a line under, you know, the troubles and accusations of terrorism and so on continuing to take place, drawing a line under it. But there were specific provisions in that act that prevented Jerry Adams from, and others like Jerry Adams, being able to make a claim against the British government for compensation. And this guy is trying to reverse those provisions so that a former IRA, not former, once you're a terrorist, you're a terrorist. An IRA terrorist can get compensation from the British government. You can't have a more anti-British Attorney General. You can't have an individual less fit to doing that job than someone who's prepared to expose the state of the United Kingdom to a monetary claim from a terrorist. The man has to go. I don't know what else he has to do. He's also responsible, by the way, for presiding over the incarceration of the 70-odd people after the Southport protests and riots, who weren't part of doing anything violent, but actually had just tweeted stuff, said stuff. He was the one responsible for making sure they got all of them got nailed. This guy's got to go. Reeves has got to go. And this is going to rock the government. I think this is, I mean, I think it's really interesting, that HBOS story, because it just could be the domino that pushes the other dominoes over.
Right. Because I was saying this earlier on in the show. I mean, what sort of a person embellishes their CV? You know, you've been in business a long time, Ben. If somebody came to you as an individual who wanted a job working for you in a trustworthy position where you were going to be handling money, where you were dealing with, you know, sensitive accounts, people, you know, who you wanted to have their trust and all of that. If you found out that somebody had lied in order to get that job, they wouldn't see the dust for you kicking them out the building, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. If there is even the remotest lie on a CV, I'd kick an employee out if they got a job on that basis. And I've heard a lot of commentators and politicians saying, oh, everyone embellishes their CV. And if that's the view that parliamentarians are taking, I'm absolutely staggered. No wonder we're in trouble.
I know.
I take a zero tolerance position on misrepresentation. I absolutely, in my business. If you're going to lie about your CV, you're going to lie about stuff when you're in the office.
Well, exactly. I mean, she's obviously very economical with the truth. She's very loose about it. You know, she's been questioned loads of times. Let's have a look at her dealing with Richard Madeley, who's not exactly a Rottweiler when it comes to investigative journalism, but she couldn't even handle questions from him. Let's have a look.
Why did you say that you'd worked at the Bank of England for a decade when, in fact, it was... Well, it wasn't even 6 years, it was 5. I mean, that's exaggeration, isn't it?
Well, I worked at the Bank of England for 6 years, between 2000 and 2006. I was employed by the Bank of England, including I spent just over a year at the British Embassy working in the economics section there, supporting the government and the bank.
Why did you say it was a decade?
Well, I think you're taking... I think it's one interview. I worked at the Bank of England for 6 years. I worked for then at Halifax Bank of Scotland, I think, for 3 years after that. I became an MP when I was 31. But I think in the end, people want to judge me on the job that I'm doing today as Chancellor of the Exchequer. I'm qualified to do this job. But in the end, people are going to judge me. Am I growing the economy? Am I improving their living standards? And I'm determined to do just that.
Yeah. Am I growing the economy? No. Am I improving their living standards? No. Am I qualified for the job? No. Am I a liar? Yes. I mean, you know, it's pretty awful,
The other interesting thing, you know, if you add up the numbers that she just went through with Madeley there, she left the Bank of England in 2006 and worked for HBOS for 3 years. Well, that puts her squarely at HBOS when HBOS went bust.
Yeah.
I don't know if she had anything to do with HBOS going bust. But the other thing that was quite interesting earlier, the clip you showed with Beth Rigby, where she said that she accepted that tax as a proportion of GDP was going to go on going up. She said that the tax burden on the economy is going to go up.
Yeah.
Well, that actually belies her earlier declarations that she's going to make the economy grow.
Right.
That these were necessary tax increases to make the economy grow. If that was going to happen, if the economy was going to grow, then actually, even though she'd put taxes up as a proportion of GDP, you'd expect the tax burden to drop.
Yeah.
And she said the opposite. So even either she doesn't know what she's talking about, or actually she's admitting that her tax increases are going to damage the economy.
Yeah.
I think that she didn't mean to do it, perhaps, but that's effectively what she did with Beth Rigby earlier.
Exactly right. You know, it reminded me of Nicola Sturgeon's interview with ITV that time when she found herself suddenly saying, when the guy said to her, are you suggesting then, the First Minister, that actually there are circumstances in which a woman with a penis is not actually a woman? And she said yes. And suddenly you could see the blood draining from her face and realising what she'd actually admitted to. Because these people are disingenuous, they're liars, they're con men and women.
Yeah.
You know, they can't lie straight in bed. I don't understand what their problem is, but they are definitely dangerous for this country, dangerous for the future, and they're crashing the economy. It's mad.
They are. And I mean, that's the big point, obviously. You know, I think the fact that she has a very loose association with the truth should see her out of her job. But the really damaging impact of Rachel Reeves is what she's doing to the British people. And the employment market has fallen off a cliff. It's weaker now than it was during lockdowns. People are losing jobs. And this is, as you say, Mike, before I came on, you said, you know, it's going to get worse in April. This is before the national insurance increases have actually taken effect. Businesses are moving ahead of it. And national debt is rising faster than the OBR had forecast. The OBR was already circumspect about the budget, saying that it was very finely balanced and things had to go right, completely right, in order for it not to be a problem, what she did. But actually, things are not going right. In December, the government borrowed more money. I think it was the third highest borrowing of a December month in history. And if she gets that equation wrong, and you see us going into recession, there was 0.1% growth in the last quarter, but, you know, that's as good as a rounding error of recession, frankly. And if we end up in recession, we end up with bank borrowing, the national borrowing going up, and we get weaker growth, so sterling drops, and you've got inflation that's up, so the Bank of England keeps interest rates up, you end up in a cycle where high interest rates are killing the economy, taxation's killing the economy, lower sterling is causing inflation to stay high, and then suddenly you find that actually the government can't finance itself because people don't want to invest in the UK and buy British government bonds. They lose confidence in the United Kingdom. And if that happens, then we'll be off cap in hand to the IMF. We haven't been in this position since the 1970s. And, you know, it's testimony to what we all know, which our governing class seem to have forgotten, the Conservatives included, that when you overtax an economy, you effectively destroy it. And we've got the highest tax burden, as Beth Rigby was saying, since World War II. Yeah. This can't go on. You can't tax your way to growth. You can't restrict your way through net zero and other regulations to growth. We've got to take the burden of the state off the neck of private enterprise and off the British people. We've got to cut regulations. We've got to ditch net zero. We've got to cut taxes. And actually, then the cake will grow. And when the cake grows, we will all be better off because we'll have more cake to eat. Yes. It's so obvious. I just don't get why they don't get it.
I know. It's incredible. It really is. It's extraordinary. Ben, very good to talk to you. Former MEP, Brexiteer Chairman of Great British PAC, BAC. How about this from David? He says, Mike, could you speculate on how many Valentine's Day cards Starmer will get? I can speculate on that. He will get one Valentine's Day card from Lord Ali. And it will say, violets are red, roses are blue. No, I'm not going to do it. It could be get into trouble. Anyway, see you later, he'll say. Coming up next, we're going to be speaking to Emma Webber, who's Barnaby Webber's mother. He was one of the victims of that terrible event in Nottingham when Valdo Callicane, a crazed schizophrenic, was allowed to walk the streets of this country and simply slaughter 3 innocent people. We'll talk to her in a moment. Also, let's get a voice note from Darren on the government.
Mike, Darren from Suffolk, great show. I've always wondered this about the government, way before Labour got in. Imagine if you are experienced in marketing and your boss says to you at work, I'm going to make you sales director. And after 6 months, when you try to understand the job, he comes in and says, I'm going to make you finance director. You know nothing about it, but you give it a go. This is what happens in cabinet reshuffles. Every 6 months, somebody comes in and they try and put their mark on things. They put a project, they spend about 100 million doing surveys and everything, and then they bugger off and the next person comes in, don't know anything about it, and they just cancel it. And this is the wastage that we get. What we've got with this Labour government is nobody has ever been in business. So there's no way any of them can do any of the cabinet jobs.
It's true. It's one of the big problems. Rachel Reeves, of course, claims to be an economist, therefore she could be Chancellor of the Exchequer. She says, I'm qualified to do the job. I'm sorry, Rachel, you're not qualified to do the job. And if you wanted to know how to do the job, maybe you would be helped out if you won some money. Check this out. It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus 1 standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Raymond says this from Howie. When I was the director of a small electrical company, I was in charge of hiring and firing. When I had an important position to fill, I used to send a short questionnaire to applicants' former employers. Example, Mr. James Smith states in his CV that he was employed by yourselves as a rocket scientist for 10 years. Is this correct? Was he punctual, honest? Could he work with minimum supervision? Would you re-employ? Surely something like this should have been done with Rachel Reeves. Well, it doesn't happen in politics, does it? Because it's all about what you actually say and who you know and what you believe in. And Rachel Reeves probably got the job because she thought, yeah, I believe in deconstructing the capitalist economy. I believe in punishing farmers. I believe in punishing pensioners. I believe in punishing anybody who doesn't vote Labour. I believe in taxing the people who send their kids to private schools. And I will basically be an enemy of the working people of this country. I'll pretend to be their friend. You're in. Do you want to be Chancellor of the Exchequer? That's what happened. 9:22.
government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear, will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 25 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Alex Phillips here, of course, taking over from 10 until 1. Plank of the Week coming out a bit later on. We'll be telling you what's coming up on that show. Right now, though, we need to speak about something much more important than all of that, and it is, of course, the terrible events of what happened in Nottingham to the terribly young two victims of what was then just a night out. Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar, killed by Valdo Calacane June of last year. I remember the day, as I'm sure all of you do. It was an awful day. Also died Ian Coates, who was an older gentleman who was just going about his business as well. This week we're told that the government have decided there should be an inquiry into how Valdo Calacane was allowed to do what he did. We've got now Emma Webber, who's Barnaby Webber's mother, to tell us what she's making of it all. Emma, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Mike. Hi, nice to see you.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a terrible story, this. I mean, it must really grate on you to talk about it every single time you have to, but you've done an incredible job of representing your son and as have all the families, representing their loved ones as well. Are you satisfied that the government is going to look into this and actually do something, as opposed to just do an inquiry which results in not much change of anything at all?
Yeah, exactly. I think that was our fear. Had we not put ourselves through what I think you've reported, but it's true, we do see it as a form of torture. It's just been relentless. All of the failings and the cover-up and the poor decision-making on and on, endless across all the agencies. So I think the key thing is we heard the word that's been used a lot by the government recently since they've come into power, certainly of public inquiry, but the difference is that this is a statutory one, so it's judge-led. And statutory is the word we wanted and needed to hear, because that means that those organisations and individuals particularly have to take the stand. They have to give evidence. They're compelled to attend. It's not a choice. Right. So it's really simple. What we want is we want the truth to come out. Yeah. We want to know, and we do want, and we will demand accountability for those gross errors and failures and negligence. But also it has to be a moment where, I'm not going to say, change will happen lightly, but this has to be a moment where it stops, because it actually happened in June 23. So we're actually going to be coming up to 2 years this June. But it's happened since, hasn't it? It's happened.
Well, it has.
Countless times since, and it's not just peculiar to Nottingham. Nottingham wasn't a city that was safe to have Barney. We know that now. But it isn't peculiar to just one mental health trust and one poor police force. In fact, in this case, it's two poor police forces. Yeah. So not a witch hunt, but it is going to be holding those that need to be held to account.
And very possibly, if this inquiry is done properly and people are held to account, and as you say, it's not a witch hunt, you don't want to necessarily punish people, but you want them to admit that they've made mistakes and in some way be sanctioned. I don't know what the sanction would be, but, because there's no other way to make these organisations kind of wake up and realise that it's not good enough to just pass the buck and say, well, he didn't take his medication because, he was frightened of needles, or, we thought he was okay, or, he seemed to be a schizophrenic last week, but this week we thought we could let him out. I mean, all of these decisions which resulted in terrible tragedy, which have ruined people's lives. And you just think, you can't just walk away and go, oh, we'll learn some lessons and we hopefully won't let it happen again.
Yeah, I call it the copy and paste. You know, unreserved apologies and lessons will be learned. That needs to go on the dusty shelf with all the other reports now, because this isn't a one-off. This isn't a one-off terrible tragedy. There are the NHS report that came out last week, the independent investigation into his care or lack of, is one of more than 600 in the last 30 years. That's just NHS homicide through mental health related reviews. And it was a god-awful fight just to get the NHS to, well, even to correspond with us properly, but to actually make that public. And it's like you said, it isn't naming and shaming in that regard, but it's holding those to account, because it's as simple as, if you don't do your job properly, then you need to suffer the consequences. Right. And it's a lot easier to cope with potentially losing your job or maybe not getting that promotion or having disciplinary action against you than it is to lose your child.
Right. And what's the time frame for all of this? When are you hoping it all gets underway?
Yeah, so that was my question to the Prime Minister. When does it start? How long is it likely to go on for? And is there any chance that this can be U-turned? Those are my three points. No chance it can be U-turned. It's going to be announced formally in Parliament over the next few weeks, and the families will all be present in the gallery that day. I think it's a moment we need to see and hear. It will start within a matter of weeks once a judge is appointed, and it's expected to conclude within 2 years, which sounds like a long time, but I think if you compare other long scandalous inquiries like the Post Office, Hillsborough, the blood scandal, these are decades. These poor families have had to wage that war. So, yeah, it's the first time, Mike, that we have been able to slightly lower our shoulders and for the first time trust a little bit in the right thing being done, because those two police forces, that mental health trust, what we already know and what we've already uncovered, there still hasn't been reported about his care, the investigation, the missed opportunities, the lack of responsibility is terrifying. And also, we believe there's an enormous miscarriage of justice. This individual, Calla Kane, is a patient in a hospital. The statistics prove that he's likely to be out within 20 years. He said he wasn't given the medication he should have been given because he didn't like needles, but he liked other sharp objects, didn't he?
Well, he's ridiculous, isn't it?
He had insight. He was mentally unwell, of course he was, but he had insight. He knew exactly what he was doing. And because of the CPS and because of the criminal justice system, this individual is in a hospital in receipt of income through the state. And if he's getting better, which he already is, as his brothers testified in his Panorama documentary, they've already got him back, then how can they keep him?
Right. And we've spoken before about this, had examples of people who are killers who were let out. I think it was one particular individual kicked a woman to death who was let out after 2 years because, again, the system is set up in such a way that, you know, these people just want to give people a second chance. And, you know, there are some people I just don't think that should get a second chance. I'm sorry, it just doesn't make any sense. People need to be kept safe in this country.
Yeah, like I said, we took our son to a city that wasn't safe to have him because there were public agencies who weren't doing the jobs properly. It was a case of who it was going to be, not when. I mean, it was unfortunately my son and Grace and Ian, but it's at such a level in this country. I think that we had an opportunity to see the new mental health bill that was being proposed for Parliament, and there's an awful lot of conversation about patient liberty and patient choice and increasing that and reducing the amount of people being sectioned. And I'm all for patient liberty and making your own choices. But if you are dangerous and if you are unwell and you pose a risk to others as well as yourself, then that has to be managed properly. You must not let this happen again in this country.
No, of course not. And what sense did you get from the Prime Minister as to, you know, how genuinely he understands how bad this situation is and how bad the system is?
Yeah, it felt like a human conversation in that room. We had our son Charlie with us, and he said, "Mum, it feels like a war cabinet meeting," because he's studying A-level history. And I said, "Charlie, I hope it doesn't end up being that, but we did have the Home Secretary, the Health Secretary, the Attorney General, the Justice Minister and the Victims Minister there. So it was a pretty heavy-hitting group of people, but it was a human conversation. Yeah. They do understand the gravity of it, but the crucial thing is that they're all aware is that we were in that room this week because of the unholy fuss and noise that we've made, and we've made since this happened pretty much, but particularly since the sentencing just over a year ago. So without all of that and without everything we've had to go through and the fight, I know almost without any doubt that we would be another swept under the carpet, another tragedy that happened, 18 months ago. We would just be the Nottingham families, whereas, let's be positive and let's, make as much noise as we need to get that change.
Totally. Well, I mean, I take my hat off to you. I can't imagine I've got a son the same age as Barnaby, and it just doesn't bear thinking about,
No.
Sorry. Listen, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Emma Webber, Barnaby Webber's mother there, talking about what happened to her son, which is so awful. You can't even begin to think about it. It's 9:35.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:37. I'm Mike Graham. It's 9:38 now, actually. Sarah says, Slippery Starmer's not much of an HR manager either, is he? Is he good at anything other than compulsive lying? Starmer and Reeves probably got each other by the BALLS with their webs of lies. No chance of one throwing the other under the bus. We're stuck with them. That may well be. We'll see. A bit of breaking news about Keir Starmer. Rhea Starmer, I nearly said there by accident. The Prime Minister spoke to the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, this morning. He was unequivocal that there could be no talks about Ukraine without Ukraine. The Prime Minister reiterated the UK's commitment to Ukraine being on an irreversible path to NATO, as agreed by allies at the Washington summit last year. Well, I mean, we'll see about that, I guess. We're going to talk to Chris Phillips, former head of National Counter-Terrorism Security here in the UK. Because, of course, Donald Trump has opened the ball, if you like, on peace talks with Vladimir Putin, and certainly an American team and a Russian team are supposed to be meeting up sometime soon in Saudi Arabia to talk about all of this. But let's find out from Chris Phillips what he makes of all of that. Chris, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. I'm going to move on to the problem with illegal migration in a minute and terrorism, but let's talk just briefly about Ukraine. A statement coming out there from Vladimir Zelensky's office saying that Keir Starmer says there can be no talks about Ukraine peace without Ukraine. Not everybody agrees with that, do they?
No. Let me tell you, it must be a nightmare being Ukrainian now, having gone through this war for all these years, and then having Trump come in and literally throw everything up in the air. Yes, of course, I'm sure they want peace, but not peace at any cost.
No, I think that's right. And I mean, the good news is, I suppose, it's a beginning of the journey on a road to peace. So, I mean, hopefully, if that means that something comes as a result of it, then it will be a good thing. Because as we always say, you know, every war ends in some way with some kind of settlement.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this war has dragged on now, and a lot of innocent people are being killed. You know, we've reached a stalemate, it seems, and the only way to deal with that is some kind of appeasement, I suppose, of Putin.
Yeah.
But it's important that the people of Ukraine make the decision.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we'll be talking about it, I'm sure, for a very long time, because it doesn't sound like something they're going to sort out in the next weekend or so. Let's talk
rebuild.
Well, quite. I mean, let's talk about a couple of other things that have been on the radar in terms of terrorism. We've got that story in Germany from yesterday where a 24-year-old Afghan national took it upon himself to drive a car into a crowd of people, which I think worries a lot of people in Germany, because it's another example of the homegrown terrorism that they've got, the problem they've got there, because they invited all these people in. We've got a similar situation going on here. I was just talking to the mother of Barnaby Webber, who wasn't killed by a terrorist but was killed by somebody who shouldn't have been on the streets. But we also know that Prevent have been in the firing line this week about all of the people like David Amess MP, like the Southport children, like various other incidents that have happened around the country. Prevent just simply hasn't done its job, has it?
Well, it's not just Prevent, to be fair. I mean, they do a really good job. It's of course, you don't hear about the ones that they successfully change.
Yeah, but there's so many people, isn't there? There's so many people they've got to keep an eye on. They can't just. They just can't do it.
If you overload a system, Mike, if you overload a system, what do you expect when you got people that do this kind of thing?
Yeah.
But what we've seen actually is our immigration and asylum laws that were set up, to be quite frank, in you know, for all the right reasons, have been completely abused, not only by those that are coming in, but actually by our own lawyers and our own judges to some extent, which has allowed us to have dangerous people on our streets. And of course, we shouldn't be surprised when this kind of thing happens. You know, this guy in Germany should have been kicked out 5 years ago.
Yeah, right.
And is still in Germany. And, you know, it's okay now, the Prime Minister of Germany saying that, you know, he's got to leave the country. Well, it's just frankly too late.
It's too late, isn't it? I mean, this is the thing. You know, when are we going to learn that letting, you know, people into the country that we don't know what they're going to do, we don't know where they've been, what their experiences are, you know, what they've seen. I mean, we talked about this over the whole business of what happened in Southport, that, you know, when you've got people coming from, you know, former war zones, and I know this was the son of people who came from a former war zone, but, you know, they've been infected and they've experienced the sorts of things that people here haven't. And so their view of death, their view of violence is completely different to what we're used to.
Exactly. And he's got no, you know, he thought he was going to get deported. He had, you know, no compunction about doing this. But, you know, this is starting to, there's starting to be a reaction to this across Europe and the States. And, you know, governments are being brought down by this. You know, you could argue that the Conservatives' inability to deal with the boats and everything that went with that has brought them down. And now in Germany, it's just a few days to the next elections, and this will bring down the serving government. I'm sure about that. And you know, it's time that those people that are in charge, that seek political power, take notice of the populations that say that this is just not good enough. We're not going to put up with this kind of unfiltered immigration into our countries, making our streets more dangerous, and you know, making our women feel unsafe, and of course these sort of crimes will pop up from from time to time.
And I think people are, you're right, I think people are getting to the point where they're just fed up. They've had enough, you know. They're not interested in you know, this open borders policy, this formally kind of, you know, very much coming from the Labour perspective of the idea that, you know, we must welcome loads and loads of people here. We must be a sanctuary state. I mean, over in America, they're seeing a bit of that with Donald Trump. You know, we've got the Attorney General in America suing New York State and New York City for allowing themselves to become a sanctuary city and completely ruining it, you know, because it doesn't work. It's not, you know, the numbers, whatever the asylum system was, you know, in the 1950s when it was invented, it may have been a good thing then, but it's now just completely and utterly not fit for purpose. It's exploited by these ghastly criminal gangs, and it's used to just ship people around the world to commit criminal activity.
It's been completely overwhelmed, and the countries that have accepted the most highest levels of immigration, Sweden, Germany, the UK, France, are the countries that are really suffering from these kinds of attacks. And you know, we don't hear of most of the attacks, let's be quite frank. You know, we'll hear about this one because it's a car knocking people over, but we're not hearing about the hand grenade that was let off in Paris, in France a couple of days ago. Right. You know, in Sweden, there is a continual gangland warfare. Right. And this is criminal gangs. And the other thing I'd like to say about this, Mike, is it's renowned through history. If you want to cause instability in countries, then you flood it with people from another group. It's happened over the years, and you know, the issues around Russia and all around that, there's no doubt that they've been feeding this into Europe to cause instability.
Well, there's certainly talk of the migrants who are moving from, say, central parts of Africa over to South America and into America via the crossings in Mexico and Texas. There's no question that some of that's being organised deliberately by the Wagner Group and other kind of, you know, so we say dodgy bodies, mercenary types who would wish to do damage to the West.
Yeah, and you know, we have been so weak. The Western nations have been so weak on this. This should have been seen years ago and as being a major issue, and they should have stronger action should have been taken. And now we're left with the remnants of people that you will find very difficult to remove from your country. You know, a lot of them aren't able to work, and you know, across the channel, if you're going to throw your passports and your IDs away, there's only one reason for doing that. It's because you don't want to be recognised who you really are. But
don't worry, because we've got a new migrant bill which is going to make sure that the authorities can look at their phones, presumably after they've thrown them into the bottom of the sea. They're going to go and look at them and find out who these people are. I mean, it does beg us to
they're given new phones, aren't they, Mike?
They are given a free phone, given a new puffer jacket. I mean, it's all good stuff. Chris, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Chris Phillips, former head of National Counter-Terrorism at Security Office. I mean, it does beg us belief, doesn't it? It's just ridiculous. Kev from Reading says, I think, Mike, it's absolutely fine that we have someone identifying as an economist. Hopefully this whole pitiful shower will collectively identify as astronauts and we can fire them into deep space. Keep up the good work. And Gerald says, Mike, please play your I don't want to play ball clip again. I was having a shower and I missed it. Well, we might do that coming up after this.
Today I will sign a series of historic executive orders. We will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 10 minutes to 10, and here we are, just about to hand over to Alex Phillips, and who's going to take you through all the way until 1 o'clock, of course. She'll be in about 9 minutes' time to tell us what's going on. We've got, of course, a big Valentine's Day special coming up tonight. It's Plank of the Week, and it is a Valentine's Day edition. Have a look.
Ashley Dalton, come on down. There she is. Ashley Dalton. This is a woman who, bearing in mind there are 7 million people trying to get to see a doctor, bearing in mind our health service is on its arse, he thought it would be a good idea to employ and make the new health minister a woman who, I don't even know how to say this, believes that it's OK to identify as a llama. A llama. So I can spit on you and get away with it. Mm-hmm. A woman who thinks that women can have a penis.
Yes. And that earlier picture that you showed before, when I saw that picture, I thought, it's Eddie Izzard. Yeah, I thought it was Eddie Izzard, 9:51. Yeah, that's coming out tonight, 7 o'clock. You don't want to miss it. Good morning, Mike. I can't help thinking about this woman, says Jim. And he's talking about the woman from Ghana who managed to find herself winning the right to stay in this country after staging a wedding that she didn't even appear at. He says, the scenario, Minister, do you take this woman, wherever she is, to be your lawful married wife, to phone her, to text her, and to try to find her eventually? The groom answers, I do. Absolutely right. Let's get another gaffe, shall we? Now, this is another one of mine, it would seem. I've been stitched up again this week. This is me talking to Rebecca Ryan from Defund the BBC. Let's talk to Rebecca Ryan, Campaign Director of Defund the Police. Defund the BBC. I don't know why I said that. You might as well defund the police while you're at it, by the way. Anyway, listen, Rebecca, a very good morning to you. It was one of those phrases that was just stuck in your head, wasn't it, from back in the old Black Lives Matter days when everybody wanted to defund the police in America. Absolutely ridiculous. Let's get a voice note from Chris.
Hi, Mike. Chris from Epsom again. Additionally, on Reeves, she is now, in effect, controlling the national economy, all right? If she was to try and get a job in the city, she would not be able to get bonded. Nobody would bond her for a job in the city because of the expenses scandal. So what the hell is she doing in charge of the nation's finances?
Well, that is a very good question, and one I think that should be answered by Keir Starmer, who basically appointed her as the first woman. Isn't it amazing? She's a woman, and she's going to be the first woman Chancellor. Yeah, we haven't had a woman leader of the party yet, mate, so I don't get too excited about it. But that's the trouble. We've managed to obtain what can only be described as some exclusive footage, however, and we've played it out a couple of times already on the show, of what goes on inside of 10 Downing Street. They've had a secret cabinet meeting this morning. Check this out.
Paint the whole world with a rainbow. That's very good.
Come on, Bungle, put that comic away, because we're going to have a game of ball.
I don't want to play ball, thank you, Zippy. I'm quite happy as I am.
Yeah, but I've decided that we're going to play ball and we're all going to throw it to each other, and then what we...
Zippy, I don't want to play ball either. I don't feel like it, because I am drawing.
Yeah, but you must, George.
Just a minute, Zippy. Why must he?
Well, because I want to play. Look, I can't throw a ball to someone if there's no one to throw it to, now can I?
Then you'll just have to think of something else to do, won't you, Zippy? Yes, you will, Zippy, because I don't want to play ball, and George doesn't want to play ball either.
Oh.
You just have to think of something else to do. I know. How about putting a tax on the farmers? Good idea. I know. How about putting VAT on private schools? Yeah, that's a great one. Just because you don't want to play ball with Zippy. You know, unfortunately, that's what's going on. Nick's in London. Let's get a word with him. He wants to talk about Rachel Reeves. Nick, very good morning to you.
Yes, hello, Michael. Morning to you. You've been talking about whether Rachel Reeves should be fired because the lies she allegedly told were small lies, little lies, trivial over trivial points. Well, if someone will lie over a small matter, a trivial matter, they'll lie over big matters as well, important matters. There's no point lying over a trivial matter. It is a trivial issue. Why lie over it?
Well, exactly. But it's not that trivial. I mean, to lie about what you've done in your career, to put fake things down on your CV. I mean, it's one thing to have a conversation with somebody in a pub and say, oh, yeah, I worked at the Bank of England for 10 years. But if you actually write it down, put it on your CV when it's not true, I think that's a bit more than trivial, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's OK saying if it were 8 years or 9 years, we're OK. That's a bit of licence. But 5 and 10, sorry. Your chance of the exchequer.
Right.
You can't tell the difference on a 100% increase.
And also, what does it tell you about her personality and her character? It's a very strange thing to want to do, isn't it?
People who lie about themselves, big themselves up, are always very suspicious characters.
Yes.
There's the lack of confidence in of themselves that means they have to compensate for themselves by exaggerating their own abilities and skills.
I mean, I've worked with some compulsive liars in my time, as you can imagine, in the world of journalism. And, I mean, you know, you can't, after a while, you can't believe anything they say. You can't trust them to do anything. You can't believe in them. You can't really welcome them into your world in any way, shape or form, because inevitably they're very toxic people.
Well, that's true, but that begs the question why Starmer keeps her.
Well, and why he appointed her in the first place.
And the only rational explanation to that I can think of is that they're all liars.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
It doesn't show up.
Yeah, I think you're right. Nick, you make a very good point. I mean, I've called Keir Starmer a compulsive liar before, because if you look through the traits of what compulsive liars are like, he fits every single one of them. It's amazing. Alex Phillips is here. Very good morning.
Hi.
How are you doing?
The thing is, though, under this government, that if you're a truth teller, you get put in prison, basically, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
If you turn around and go, well, you know what, the crime rate's gone up since a load of people came over on boats, that, well, you can't say that, you're a racist.
You are.
So it's like the government gaslights us and then expect us to go along with it and lie to ourselves.
Yes.
So actually lying is the new telling the truth, basically.
Well, I mean, only this week in Prime Minister's Questions, Keir Starmer told a lie at the dispatch box, which is supposed to be something you can't get away with doing.
Yeah.
You know, he made out that the Garzon rule came in under the Tory government. Didn't. Untrue.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, these people just tell lies for a living. You know, also, what sort of person pretends that they did something that they didn't do? What's the point of that, exactly?
No, but I mean, you know, they just think this is the art of politics and political spin. The thing is now with, you know, platforms like X, people say we used to live in a post-truth era. We actually now live in a truth era.
Yes.
If anything, we live in an era where you suddenly realise, when you look at what's going on in America and the stuff that Doge is finding out and uncovering and where US aid has gone.
Right.
I saw this one post that US aid had been giving a significant amount of money to a particular news outlet, not ours, nothing to do with us. And it was coming from the Department of Defence, actually. And on the invoice that was dug out, it said for a public disinformation campaign. And you're like, this is crazy. And you suddenly realise that, that you can't say that virus came out of a Chinese lab. And it's like, well, it did,
except now you can.
Now it's
now
okay.
it's all right, yeah. And Rory Stewart, what about him? His wife apparently got £1 million a year.
And what were they? Wasn't it
run
like
some kind of Afghan basket weaving or something?
Yeah, basket weaving and doing the V&A or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
All of this
There's an awful lot of money